Hey guys, welcome to Gotham Fanfics. Today we will be exploring what if Spider-Man was teleported to the DC Universe Part 2. Make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Enjoy. Chapter 11, Territory Dispute. Summary. Spider-Man helps Red Hood, but he isn't exactly grateful for the assistance. Chapter text. It was nearly impossible for Peter to shake Duke and Tim. He had probably told them, "No, I'm fine, I don't need a ride," 20 times in 2 minutes. Eventually they caved, and Peter had to make it all the way across Gotham, avoiding security cameras with 2 very full bags of supplies. He might have stuck to some walls to escape muggers, but no one saw, so who cares? Finally, when he made it back to the crime alley apartment, he opted for the fire escape instead of his usual jump. Dumping his bags on the floor, Peter decided to organize his groceries. He had bought quite a hefty amount of things, costing him $135. He was really hoping to get the Wayne scholarship that included a stipend, otherwise he'd need to find a job. After putting away his multiple med kids, suture kids, and other miscellaneous supplies including some snacks and disinfectant soap, Peter was in a cleaning mood. He decided to organize the apartment, using the room with the giant hole in the wall as his bedroom since it had the least amount of trash. Taking a walk around the apartment, he noticed one of the doors was locked. Gently slamming into the door, trying not to obliterate it, the door swung open to reveal a coach. After a careful examination, Peter found it had no bed bugs, and if someone had seen him, they'd have thought he won the lottery with how happy he was. After adjusting some of the pipes and using the help of Karen's plumbing knowledge, Peter successfully improved the shower situation. Using the bathroom tub, he then cleaned the couch cushions until the water ran clear enough. Moving the couch to his new room, Peter folded his clothes and put them in the CVS plastic bags, tying them and hanging the bags on a protruding wood plank. After 2 hours, the apartment looked cleaner. Sure, there was a huge pile of garbage in a corner, but Peter just averted his eyes. He now had a couch bed at least. By nightfall, Peter was buzzing to go out on patrol. The nanotech suit wrapped around his body, and he pulled 2 new web cartridges out of his backpack. Finally suited up, he went to leave the apartment, and there was a mugger right below his window, like literally 40 feet away. Silently closing the window, Peter jumped down from the wall, landing between the 2 men. Okay, let's review. Innocent person on the floor, bad guy with a weapon, yep, classic crime scene. Mind if I improvise? Spider-Man shot out his web, blinding the mugger. Then using a web bomb, he stuck the guy to the wall. After making sure the man got his belongings back, Spider-Man continued on his patrol, and it was going smoothly. Spider-Man liked the petty crimes. He enjoyed looking out for the little guy. But mid-swing, Peter saw the undeniable flash of gunfire coming from the distance. As he got closer to the scene, he could hear at least 10 heartbeats, and when he could finally get in view of the action, he saw it was now 8. There were multiple men cornering one guy, and they seemed to be protecting a van. A van that definitely contained drugs. Thank you, Super Smell, Peter smirked. Flipping into the scene, Spider-Man exclaimed, "Whoa, 7-on-1, how is that fair?" In response, he was met with a spiked bat swinging for his head. The fight that ensued was simple. Spider-Man shot webs, bad guys ended up on the floor. The cornered guy, who was wearing a red mask, had been helpful too. Immediately Peter knew he was a vigilante. And after about 5 minutes of mild fighting, despite all the henchmen being either dead, Peter would like to note this was the other guy's doing, or incapacitated, Peter's spidey sense flared up and he lunged to the side, dodging a bullet. Wait, a bullet. Turning to face the masked man, Spider-Man noticed that his dark red-barreled pistol was pointed directly at him. You know, usually when I save someone a simple thank you is, but before he could finish his sentence, another bullet was flying in his direction. Skillfully evading the stream of bullets coming his way, Spider-Man shot out a web, confiscating the weapon. "Okay man, what is your problem?" Spider-Man asked as he saw the masked man pull out another gun from his jacket. "What are you doing in my territory?" He was definitely using a voice modulator. "Your territory? What are you talking about?" Spider-Man put his hands on his hips, frustration clear in his voice. "Crime Alley is mine. If you want to bother someone, do it somewhere else." His voice was definitely threatening, and the fact he was built like a fridge didn't help. But Peter had taken down guys 3 times his size, so he wasn't going to run away from this guy. "Listen, you Party City Power Ranger, I'm just trying to help people. You looked like you were in trouble, so I helped. Besides, clearly you can't tackle this whole place by yourself. I've helped dozens of people in the past 2 hours, and you were nowhere in sight." Peter probably should have watched his mouth on that last comment because the guy immediately emptied his chamber trying to hit Spider-Man. Jumping up, flipping onto the top of the van, Peter spoke. "Look, I'm sorry you're offended, I'm in your territory, but this van has substances that need to be confiscated. How would you know? Red Mike and Ike scoffed. He was out of bullets and instead pulled out a knife. "'Kay, what else you got in that jacket of yours? 'Cause I could really go for a cheeseburger." After a beat of silence, Peter whistled. "Okay, tough crowd. Listen, mister, I am just trying to do my job." Neither of the men spoke, and then Peter heard the sound of a child's scream. It was far enough that no normal person could hear it. Turning to face the sound, Spider-Man rushed out. "Okay, I need to get out of here. You can deal with the drug van, right? Thanks." With that, he launched himself towards the scream. Flying through the air, Spider-Man heard the guy call someone and then take off on some sort of vehicle. Peter groaned as he realized the guy was following him. Swinging around a corner of a building, Peter saw a kid being shoved into a van. The last thing the kid did before the door closed was let out a desperate scream as he saw Peter swinging. "Spider-Man, help." It was Stanley. Peter would have been able to identify that gap-toothed 9-year-old from a mile away. Using a trick Peter 3 taught him back home, Spider-Man sprayed 2 webs to the top of a lamppost and positioned himself like a slingshot. Once there was enough tension, he released himself and flew towards the van. Crashing into the back of the vehicle, Peter crawled to the driver's window. Thankfully, it was already halfway down. "Just checking, do you charge extra for hostage passengers, or is that included in the criminal scumbag package?" The driver nearly jumped out of his skin with Spider-Man's sudden appearance, swerving the car in between lanes. As Spider-Man opened his mouth to speak again, a gunshot rang through the air. It was an excellent shot, taking out the back left wheel of the car. Touring to see the gunman, Peter wasn't that surprised to see the guy from earlier racing over on a motorcycle. "Fuck its hood," the driver screamed, alerting the men in the back. The car began to skid without one of its wheels, and as it neared a building, Spider-Man jumped in front of the vehicle, stopping the car with brute strength. The men poured out of the car, all running in different directions. Spider-Man saw the guy from earlier flank to his left, so Spider-Man went after the others. Since the men had no weapons on them, it was an easy capture. Spider-Man dragged them back to the kidnapping van like Santa's sack as he ran to check on Stanley. Paying no attention to the lock, Peter flung the door open. Curled in a ball on the floor was a shaking and crying Stanley. "Hey fucker, we aren't done talking," the guy grunted, walking towards the van. Ignoring him, Peter softly entered the car. "Hey Stanley, are you okay? It's me, Spider-Man." As he spoke, he saw Stanley's tear-filled eyes glance up. "Spider-Man," Stanley yelled as he launched himself towards the hero. "I wanna go home." He hiccuped as he cried, gripping onto Peter like a lifeline. Picking up Stanley, he exited the van. The guy from earlier stopped in his tracks. "How'd you know there was a kid in there?" "How'd you know where I was going?" Peter shot back, voice gentle but threatening as he rubbed Stanley's back. Peeking over his shoulder, Stanley sucked in a breath as he saw the guy, whispering, "Red Hood." The guy Red Hood nodded in response. "What are you doing out so late?" He started to cry again. "I got mad at my mom, and I ran away ye." As he wailed, Peter patted his back, shushing him and telling him small reassurances. "Do you know your mom's number?" Peter asked. "I think she would be very happy to know you're okay." After calling Stanley's mother, Peter offered to stay with the kid until he was picked up, allowing Red Hood to leave. Mounting his bike, Red Hood turned his head towards the pair on the curb. "Don't get in my way, Spider-Man." Chapter 12: A Step Forward. Summary. Peter finally seems to be making progress. He has friends, a school, and hope. Chapter text. After his run-in with the Red Hood, the pair hadn't had any more problems. Peter kept crime fighting throughout Gotham, taking extra precautions to not bump into any other vigilantes. Stepping out of the shower, Peter asked Karen, "Anything important today?" "Nothing except that today you get the results of your entrance exam," Karen responded, excited for Peter. Upon hearing the news, Peter fell over his own feet, catching himself before hitting the floor. "Really, that's today? Okay, we have to go to the library." Changing into his clothes, Peter rushed out the fire escape. "You realize I could open the email right now, Peter?" Karen asked, amused by the teen's sudden excitement. "Yeah, but that's not the same. There's no suspense. Ned and I love to slowly reveal our Pokémon cards one at a time. It's much more fun than just laying them all out at once." In his rambling, Peter didn't even notice that he had mentioned Ned, at least until his grief caught up with him and the lump in his throat formed. The rest of his walk to the library was silent. Peter nor Karen attempted to speak. Pushing the door to the library open, Peter waved at the librarian. If she was dangerous enough to alert his spidey senses, he needed to be on her good side. "Good morning, ma'am." Babs looked up from her desk, waving back with a smile, "Good morning." Opening the computer, Peter decided no hacking was necessary today. He just used the guest account. Logging into the computer and signing into his email, Peter saw it. The email was screaming to be opened. Immediately, Peter went to open the email and subconsciously shut his eyes as he clicked the letter. After a second or two, he slowly peeled his eyes open, revealing the big block letters, "You're in." Yes, Peter exclaimed, standing up, arms raised. He winced at the loud sound. After all, he was in a library. "Sorry, ma'am," Peter whispered his apology. Sitting back down, he inspected the rest of the email. Not only had Peter got in, not only did he get %100, he got the Wayne Foundation full-ride scholarship. Unable to control his excitement, Peter began punching the air as he spun in his chair. Mid-celebration, the library door opened, and Peter couldn't believe it. Tim was here. Tim had been kicked out of the house. Bruce said he needed to see the sun before summer was over, and as much as he tried to resist, he still ended up outside the creepy iron gates. He figured he could stop by Babs before meeting up with Duke at school, and on his journey he made sure to keep an eye out for a certain arachnid-themed hero. Before being exiled from the manor, Tim had spent a total of 27 hours investigating Spider-Man. After their last exchange, one where Tim never actually got to speak with the guy, he was desperate to find out more. At first he figured having the guy's actual handwriting would make the search easy. He cross-referenced Spider-Man's handwritten note to everything the Batservers had access to. He looked at anything, signatures on bills, handwritten essays from every school in the country, anything, but he came up empty-handed. Thinking back to how he discovered Dick's identity as Robin, Tim investigated the hero's swinging style, but it seemed to be completely erratic and unlike anything he'd ever seen. Next was his fighting style, but after finding nothing similar on record, Tim enlisted Damien's assistance. And when the child told Tim that the fighting style was nothing like the League would have taught, Tim contemplated killing the 10-year-old. He figured Babs might have some more footage of the hero, or she could offer him some assistance on his search. When he walked into the library, before he could even say hello to the woman, she told him, "I can't help you, Timmy. I swear. I've already given you all the footage, patrol routes, and voice notes I have of the guy." Groaning, Tim responded, "Hello to you too, Barbara." Putting his arm on her desk, he looked around and spotted Peter. What is he doing here? Tim thought as he walked over. After saying a depressing hello to the librarian, he saw Peter and changed his course. "Hey Peter, what you doing here?" "I like libraries," he replied, smiling ear to ear. "What's got you so excited?" Tim questioned as he leaned on the divider. "I don't know if you checked yet, but the exam results came out today." Peter tried to sound nonchalant but failed spectacularly. Tim tensed at the mention of the exam, and for a second Peter thought maybe Tim didn't get in. "So, am I going to see you this year?" "Yeah, I can't wait. I hope I don't get too lost, though. My last school wasn't as big." Peter shrugged, and Tim made his way behind him to look at the email. Patting him on the shoulder, Tim told him, "Well, in that case, let's go right now. Duke's gonna be there in a bit for his student council duties or whatever." "Oh no, don't worry about it." Peter waved his hands, trying to make it clear it was that big of a deal, but to no avail. Tim was already closing his tabs. "Seriously, it's no biggie. Besides, you should get to know campus. It can be pretty confusing." Peter had only seen the place once, and he knew it was true, so he didn't argue. Tim's car was nice, like way too nice for a teenager to be able to afford. But then again, he did go to Gotham Academy, and that tuition definitely wasn't a small fee. When they pulled up to the school, Tim called Duke. Then like clockwork, 2 minutes later, the guy was walking down the stairs of the main entrance. "Hey man, Peter, what are you doing here?" "Our friend Peter here has gotten into this institution, and I figured we could give him a tour," Tim explained as the pair walked to meet Duke. "Oh, for sure," Duke smiled at Peter. "Congrats on getting in, by the way." "Thanks," Peter smiled back. "Well, do you have your schedule? It should be linked in the bottom of the acceptance email. We can show you around based on your class route," Duke explained as they entered the building. Pulling up the email again, he read out his classes: AP Chemistry, AP US History, AP Calc BC, AP Language, AP Physics, and Photography. "Hey, we have a few classes together," Tim exclaimed as he looked over Peter's shoulder, peering at his schedule. "Yeah, me too," Duke agreed. As luck would have it, Peter had AP Chem and AP USH with Duke and AP Lang and Photography with Tim. Once Peter could find all of his classes without any help from Duke or Tim, the boys showed Peter all their favorite shortcuts through the campus, and Duke even showed Peter the best ways to sneak out. "Oh, and I know you said you love libraries, but you aren't gonna love ours, sorry," Tim sighed as he opened a door, revealing a very depressing library. It had only 6 bookshelves, most of them half empty, and a handful of circular desks. Yeah, most of the kids here come from enough money to be able to afford private tutoring, so the library kinda sucks, Duke shrugged. Once their tour was finished, Duke suggested, why don't we go and get something to eat? You know, to celebrate your acceptance. Basking in the high of hanging out with friends, Peter nodded almost immediately. Sure, I don't have anywhere to be, so why not? Awesome, I'll go tell the class president I'm leaving. Be right back, Duke waved before jogging off. Tim ended up driving the group. Are you guys okay with Batburger? I've been craving their fries, Duke asked, leaning between Tim and Peter from the backseat. Tim nodded, and Peter just raised his eyebrow at the name of the place. Don't tell me you haven't been to Batburger, Tim gasped, braking hard at the red light while whipping his head to stare at Peter in shock. Well, I mean, the name doesn't sound that great. What, do they use bat meat instead of cow or something? Peter questioned, laughing at Tim and Duke's shocked faces. No, dude, Duke laughed, leaning back into his seat. It's named after Batman. Oh, Peter sighed, nodding his head with a slight chuckle. Yeah, that makes more sense. When the group pulled up to the restaurant, it was very clearly Batman-themed. The bat signal that Peter had seen every night as Spider-Man was plastered all over the windows, and the booths inside the place all had the same gray, yellow, and blue color scheme. Okay, since it's your first time, Duke slung his arm around Peter as they entered. You have to get the bat meal. It's like a kid's meal from McDonald's, but bigger and better. Plus, the toy you get is a figurine of one of the bats. Following Duke's advice, Peter ordered a bat meal. And despite his intense protests, Duke paid for everyone's food, arguing, well, I made you guys come here. As it turned out, all the boys had bought a bat meal, and as Duke and Peter waited for Tim to get the food, Duke educated Peter on the rarity of the figurines. By the time Tim had arrived, Peter had learned about Duke's small collection of signal figurines he keeps in his room, and he had even seen a few photos. Opening the box with a bat pull-to-open tab, Tim groaned, Dude, I have gotten spoiler like 3 times in a row. And he pulled out a figurine of a girl in a black and purple suit, with 2 blonde hair pieces sticking out. Well, you love who I got, Duke rolled his eyes as he pulled out a doll that Peter identified as Red Robin. Ooh, yes, Tim grinned, grabbing the toy from Duke. What about you, Peter? Who'd you get? Duke asked, nodding towards Peter's box. Rummaging through his meal, Peter pulled out a Red Hood toy and Duke's jaw dropped. Did you have no idea how rare that is? Like, oh my god, I have never gotten Red Hood ever and I eat here all the time. Duke rambled, gawking at the toy. And to Peter's surprise, Tim was impressed too. You could probably sell it on eBay for $30 or so, Tim suggested. Peter hummed as he examined the toy. It was surprisingly accurate. You know, I thought Batman was super strict on his rules, Peter thought out loud. Whatcha mean? Tim asked, taking a bite of his burger. Well, I mean, everyone knows he has a no-killing rule, yet the Red Hood is on his team. If he was lenient on that rule, then maybe he wouldn't mind a meta like Spider-Man. I don't know, just a thought, Peter shrugged as he picked up his burger, throwing the toy back into the box. With that, the boys dove into their meals. As they ate, they talked about their favorite shows, school subjects, and everything in between. They sat in their booth long after they finished eating, and their laughter bounced off the walls of the fast food restaurant. Eventually, it started to get late, and Tim interrupted their laughing. Okay, seriously though, Duke, and I have to get home. Extending his phone to Peter, he continued, but we gotta do this again, man. He clearly was hinting at Peter to give him his number, but Peter had no phone that would work here. Shoot, my phone's broken, but I can give you my email. Duke immediately jumped into the conversation, taking his phone out too. Yes, that's perfect. After Peter gave them his email, Tim and Duke dropped Peter off at the subway station. See you later, Peter, Duke yelled through the car window before the car sped off. Peter smiled to himself. He hadn't felt this light in days. Walking to the crime alley apartment was easy too. Someone attempted to mug him only once, a new record. A few blocks before he made it to the apartment, Peter spotted something in a dumpster nearby. It was a computer, definitely a bit older than the one in the library, and it was broken. But it would be better than taking a 30-minute walk every time he wanted to go online. Carrying it up the fire escape, Peter worked on the computer until it was dark outside. In that time, he had also gone dumpster diving a few more times to get some necessary tools, wire, screwdriver, cables, and a hard drive from a less damaged but older model. After plugging it into 4 outlets, he found one that shocked the computer to life. As he sat next to the boarded-up front door, he logged into his email. He saw he already had an email waiting for him. Peter, thanks for eating with us today. I still can't believe you never had Batburger before. Tim says hi by the way, and don't be so worried about school. Y'all have 2 friends going into the new school year. Dog. Friends, Peter had friends. With everything that had happened to him, Peter had gotten used to keeping his circle of friends depressingly small. But maybe, just maybe, this could be different. Smiling, Peter typed out a response. He hadn't felt this good in a long time, so of course the only thing left to do was to go on patrol. Chapter 13, Rooftop Reflections. Summary. Spider-Man takes on Gotham's nightlife, but is interrupted when an unexpected someone breaks into Karen's systems. Chapter text. Peter was swinging through Gotham, and had been doing so for at least 2 hours when Karen started to act up. Peter, there is something in my system. Flipping onto a building, Peter asked, what do you mean? Is there someone trying to override? No, it's a message. Karen glitched as a notification dinged in the peripheral of the mask. Open it, Peter responded cautiously. Instinctively, he took on a defensive stance, expecting this message to be a distraction, expecting a villain to lunge out of the darkness. Peter wishes it was a bad guy. Instead, it was Ned, or at least a video of him. Hey Peter, I'm really stoked that I got this to work. Well, you know I'm out of town today, but I had to do something. He fiddled with his shirt before reaching for something off camera. Anyways, happy birthday, man. I can't believe you're 18 already. Ned popped a confetti popper as he smiled. I'll give you your actual gift when I get back, but this will have to do for now. Okay, I hope this works. Karen, play the video. Karen's screen froze before shocking back to life as MJ popped up this time. Hey loser, happy birthday. Congrats on surviving another year without falling off a building. Seriously though, you're the best dork I know, and I guess I kinda like having you around. She looked away as she confessed, a hint of a blush tickling its way up to her cheeks. Anyway, enjoy your day and don't do anything too heroic, at least not until after cake. See you later, Spider-Boy. As she waved, the video switched to Happy and May, happy birthday. Happy waved to the camera the same time May yelled, happy 18th Peter. Rubbing the back of his neck, Happy shrugged as a smile tugged at his lips. Hey look, I know I don't say this a lot, but Tony saw something in you. And I see it too. You're an amazing kid and he'd be proud of you. I know I am. Next, May spoke up, waving her hands around. Okay, I don't want to distract you too much from your hero stuff, but I just wanted to say I cannot believe how fast you're growing up. It feels like just yesterday you were this little kid running around with glue in your hair, and now you're, well, still running around, but hopefully with less glue. As she smiled, something burned inside Peter. Stay safe, and I love you so much, kiddo. Make sure to come home in one piece. And then the video ended, and Peter couldn't breathe. His mask, which usually grounded him, was suffocating. He wanted to rewatch the video 1,000,000 times, ingrain their images in his mind, immortalize them in his memories. But he could barely get air in and out, asking Karen to replay that the video was out of the question. He stumbled as he gripped his chest. Peter, your heartbeat is at an alarming rate. You need to calm down. Karen's voice was distant. She sounded like she was 1,000 miles away. Dangerous thoughts circled Peter's mind. How could I be having fun today? How ignorant could I be? My friends think I might be dead. God, May is dead. She's dead. They are all dead. Peter, retract. Karen was speaking, but her voice was drowning in his mind. Dangerous condition, not be now. He didn't know how, but he ended up on the floor of the rooftop on all fours. Unlike last time, sobs didn't rake his body, his cries didn't shake him to his core. This time he wept silently. His mouth was agile, nothing but the sound but his harsh breathing came out. He wanted to be home, and no matter how much he tried to fix up that stupid apartment in Crime Alley, it wasn't home. Don't be weak, Peter. You've only been here for a few days. This realization only worsened his condition, though. Peter couldn't help but spiral. If he could barely last 10 days, what would happen if Dr. Strange never found him? God, it had only been 10 days. No matter how hard Peter tried to forget about his past, bury himself with the problems of the present, he seemed to always be haunted. His responsibility as Spider-Man was a haunting reminder of what happened to Uncle Ben. The suit he wore on his back was a reminder of the hopes Tony had for Peter, hopes he failed. The fact that he was in this God-forsaken city was a reminder of his failure back home. Crawling on the floor of the building, Peter desperately tried to take in air. He leaned over the edge, dragging himself to his feet. Then he stood on the ledge. Anything to report, Nightwing asked mid-swing. Seems to be a relatively quiet night, but with this rain, there is bound to be some kind of crash, so I'll keep you updated, her voice rang through the calm. Nightwing swung between the buildings with ease. The rainstorm was abrupt, but then again it was Gotham. Whipping the water off his face, he reached out his grappling hook again. Flying through the air, he could have sworn he saw someone on that roof. It was just the rain though, right? Knowing he'd rather be safer than sorry, he did a quick flip, changing directions, and he was thankful that he did. Standing on the top of the building was a kid, no older than 15 probably. He was soaked head to toe. Clearly he'd been standing there for a while. As he got closer, he made sure not to scare the kid. Especially with the rain, the ledge was slippery. One wrong step and he'd fall down the 50-story building. He landed as softly as possible a couple yards behind the kid, but apparently not quiet enough. The second his foot touched the ground, the kid swiveled around, his hands flying to his face. After gripping his face, trying to hide, he stared at Dick with a mixture of emotions fighting for control. Raising his hands to show that he wasn't a threat, Dick called out over the rain, "This rain is crazy, isn't it?" The kid didn't react, blinking harshly as the rain thrashed against his face. And as a bolt of lightning struck down nearby, Dick could see the large purple bruise painting the kid's cheek. Dick began taking timid steps towards him. "You know, I get that the view is nice, but I think it's better from here, don't you think?" Turning his head back to look at the city, panic rose in Dick's chest. Did he say something wrong? Immediately he rushed forward and grabbed the kid's wrist. I'm not gonna kill myself." He looked back to Dick with confusion wrinkling his forehead. Now that he was close, Dick could really take him in. He was a bit smaller than he should be. His body slightly shook from the cold and rain, and his eyes, it was clear he had been crying. His eyes were bloodshot and sunken, and if his physical state wasn't enough to prove it, his eyes screamed that he was tired. "Then why are you standing on the ledge of the building?" He didn't mean to say it, but the words tumbled out of his mouth. Looking down at the potential fall, the kid slightly shook his head, mumbling, I don't know." Nightwing's comm crackled, and Oracle began to say something, but he silenced his comms swiftly. Besides, if it was really important, she would figure out a way to reach him. The kid began to move, and Nightwing's hand flew towards his grappler, ready to jump after the kid if he had to. But he just sat on the edge, feet hanging off. Letting go of the kid's wrist, he too took a seat on the ledge. "Mind if I sit here?" He kept his voice soft. For a while neither of them moved. The rain poured down, and a few claps of thunder echoed into the night. Suddenly the kid spoke up, but not above a whisper. In fact, if Nightwing wasn't on high alert, his tiny confession might have been drowned out with the weather. "Today's my birthday." The kid looked out at the Gotham skyline and sniffled while letting out an empty laugh. "August 10th, but I didn't even remember, got no one to celebrate with." He shrugged his shoulders as he spoke and drew his lips into a tight line, holding in everything he felt. Dick's heart broke a bit. The thought of this kid being alone on a rooftop, attempting to do something like that, and on his birthday. A million thoughts flooded his mind and questions bubbled inside him. Most of all, he wanted to know who did that to his face. As he opened his mouth to ask one of his burning questions, the kid swung his legs around and slid himself onto the floor of the roof. The worry that held so tightly onto the vigilante released as the kid abandoned the ledge. Dick then followed suit and pointed to a wall they could sit against. It had a bit of roof covering. The kid walked emotionless. Everything about him seemed robotic. There was no real life in his eyes. He didn't even seem to realize that it was raining before Dick had approached him. Dick then took a seat on the floor, gesturing to the spot next to him. Without changing his expression, without uttering a word, the kid sat down, a few inches farther than Dick would have liked. Turning up the exothermic heating system in his suit, trying to warm the kid up, the vigilante looked to the sky. "Do you like the rain?" After a few minutes, the kid responded, "Not really." It was clear he was thinking about something at that moment. His eyes got cloudy and he became tense. It might have been the rain, but Dick swore he saw a tear fall, so he wasn't going to push anymore. But surprisingly, the kid spoke again. It was raining when they died." "Oh." Dick knew this feeling all too well. "When did it happen?" He replied just as quietly as the kid spoke. When the kid's hands clenched and unclenched repeatedly, and when no response came, Dick realized he pushed too far. So he opted for a different direction, trying to redirect the attention that made the kid wither. "After I lost my parents, I hated anything that reminded me of their death. It felt like they were holding me back every time I tried to move on." As he spoke, he could feel the kid turn to look at him. After they sat in silence for a minute, a young voice broke the silence. "Does it ever go away, that feeling?" The kid choked out, sounding so small right now. He seemed as if he might break if Dick said the wrong thing. With a sad smile, Dick looked out at Gotham. "No, it doesn't." Part of him wanted to lie, tell the kid it all gets better, but you just have to realize that these people that you lost, they loved you. And this gnawing feeling isn't them holding you back. The grief you feel when you try to move on, it's not them haunting your life. It's just a reminder that they existed. The pain you feel, it's proof that you loved them and they loved you. As Dick looked back to the kid, his bottom lip quivered and his eyes were glassy. The two sat like that for another minute or two, the kid staring off into the rain, pain plaguing his expressions, and Dick watching him as he took it all in. Finally, the kid's breathing became even and his eyes, although they still were darkened with sadness, they had a sliver of something bright in them. "It's cold. I should get home, and I bet you have somewhere to be, mister." The kid stood up and cleared his throat. "Oh, please call me Nightwing." The kid stared at Nightwing expectantly, waiting. After an awkward silence, Dick broke the silence. "I'm not leaving you until you're on solid ground, you know that, right?" A somber laugh escaped the kid's lips. "Wanna swing me down?" And usually Dick would say no. It's dangerous and the rain only makes things worse. But this kid, he needs a pick-me-up, no pun intended. So against his better judgment, he shrugged. "Why not? Think of it as a birthday present." Smiling softly, the kid reached out and suddenly hugged the vigilante. Pulling him closer, Dick held him until he felt his grip weaken, ready to go. Silently nodding, the kid whipped his face, and then Dick grabbed him, swinging them both back onto the floor. Their walk to the subway station was quiet, but it couldn't have been better. Chapter 14: Learning to Remember. Summary. Sometimes Peter Parker's struggles come first, so Spider-Man takes a day off. However, a surprising house guest changes that. Chapter text. After that night on the rooftop, Peter was different. Duke and Tim noticed it too. They would never bring it up to him, but the duo noticed how he slowly started making himself more distant. The minute he started to open up, he closed off again. It was hard to figure out what was going on in his head, even for Peter himself. He tried to listen to Nightwing, but everything was so hard. He thought about what the black and blue vigilante had told him in the rain, that your grief is just proof of love. But since when was loving so painful? Since that night, Peter hasn't been able to avoid his feelings. Every time he left the crime alley apartment, something reminded him of his friends and family back home, so he started going out less. In the past, he would just ignore these feelings, sit in silence, pushing away the memories. But now he tries his best to remember why it hurts. When he walks past a store and sees a Lego set Ned and him built a year ago, he smiles and thinks about how fun it was. Of course, he usually ends up needing to sit on a bench and take deep breaths after those moments. And when he's out getting coffee with Tim and walks past a girl with the name Michelle written on the cup, he nearly breaks his neck to look again. It's not his MJ, but he allows himself to remember all their coffee dates. He thinks about how much she smiled when she found out she got that job at the coffee shop. Embracing his friend's memories becomes easier with time. He struggles heavily with May's memory, though. It's the same as when he lost his parents, Uncle Ben, Tony, and to be honest, he wasn't completely over Tony's death yet. But some nights he can't bring himself to leave his couch bed. He doesn't cry. He just lays down, staring at the ceiling. Tonight was one of those nights. 'Twas the night before the first day of school. Around 9, he was getting ready to go on patrol, and he thought about how May would scold him for going out the night before the first day. He'd been laying on the couch since then. It's 11. It's all, Looming in the shadows, Nightwing was observing a child trafficking ring. They had been growing, becoming more bold. That's why he was in Gotham. Usually Nightwing would stay in Bloodhaven, but B had requested he visit while he dealt with Two-Face. Everything was going well. Nightwing was waiting to catch the traffickers red-handed when another van pulled up. And the driver, he had a suspiciously athletic build and white streak of hair that Dick would recognize anywhere. Reaching up to his earpiece, Nightwing whispered, "Oh, do you have Red Hood's location?" Grunting, she replied, "Currently he has his location turned off. Why?" Smiling at the shadow of his brother easily passed through their security. "'Cause he's here." Flipping down from his current corner, the security gunman at the door immediately pointed at Nightwing. "You do realize I'm not the one you should be worried about, right?" Leaning against a nearby van, he saw their faces contort in confusion and immediately looked towards the sky, looking for Batman. Then the sound of gunshots erupted from inside the warehouse, and the color drained from the men's faces. Bingo! Nightwing cheered as he began disarming the men. Bursting through the door, he saw Red Hood taking on the entire warehouse. Jumping into action, the two heroes worked in tandem for the next 30 minutes, as the flickering light of gunshots erupted and the screams of scared children, all of whom were in cages, filled the warehouse. It was a surprisingly difficult fight. There were more men than expected, and Nightwing was thankful Red Hood was here, so he didn't have to call for backup. Red Hood, on the other hand, didn't carry the same sentiment. "The fuck you doing here?" "It's great to see you too, Red Hood," Nightwing panted, "and I'm doing great, thanks for asking." Although you couldn't see his eyes, Dick knew his little brother was rolling them. Red Hood turned around and rummaged through the desk drawers until he found a ring of keys. Limping towards the cages, the ex-crime lord left a trail of blood. He then opened all the cages and looked toward his older brother. "You're dealing with Gordon." Then he raised his grappling hook, clutching his side. "You should come back to the cave." Dick looked at his severely injured brother. "Get cleaned up." I'd rather bleed out, thanks. Making a dramatic exit, Red Hood used his grappling hook to escape the building. Once on the roof, he began heading towards his motorcycle. It was hidden roughly 2 blocks away. Usually this wasn't a problem, and he would leap from roof to get there. But tonight had been far more strenuous than he had expected. He had gotten shot at least twice, and he was impaled 4 times. So instead, he descended from the warehouse roof and jogged to his bike. He definitely wasn't going to make it back to his apartment in one piece, but he did have a few safe houses that were closer. Peter wasn't sure why he felt so dull. He was frustrated with the feeling and then himself for harboring it. He'd been laying on the couch bed for hours and had finally gotten up to use the bathroom. As he began to wash his hands, he looked in the cracked mirror and saw the crater in the wall he made his first night here. He thought about how badly he wanted Aunt May at that moment, how he wished he had someone to take care of him. That's when he heard it. The window to the apartment was being opened. Someone was trying to break in. Great Peter thought. Now he had to deal with another homeless person, and he felt pity bloom in his stomach. He didn't want to kick this person out, but the two of them couldn't stay at the apartment, especially not since Peter had a secret identity to protect. Opening the broken door, the smell of blood filled his nostrils, and then the smell of gunpowder. Peter walked along the wall and peeked around the corner. On the floor next to the window was Red Hood. What is he doing here? Does he know I'm Spider-Man? Thoughts raced in Peter's mind for a minute, until logic brought him back to earth. The guy was bleeding out. His gloves were covered in a red shiny liquid, and so was the inside of his jacket. His breaths were also short and rigid. Approaching the man cautiously, Peter gently tapped him on the shoulder. Excuse me, Mr. Red Hood. Are you okay? He got no response. Looking at the man's diminishing state, he was suddenly grateful he didn't go out on patrol tonight. He was going to take care of Red Hood. Chapter 15, Safe House for Two. Chapter text. After carrying the vigilante into the room with the couch, Peter began rushing around the crime alley apartment. He pulled out his recently purchased first aid supplies and dumped them on the floor before he started to strip the jacket off the vigilante. Once that was removed, Peter got to work. He stopped as much bleeding as he could and was very happy that all the bullet wounds had entrance and exit points, meaning he didn't need to dig any bullets out of the guy. Eventually, Peter worried that the guy might be concussed, and he knew better than to remove the mask of an unconscious vigilante. Instead, he listened carefully to the man's heartbeat and monitored his movements. Once he was sure the guy was unconscious, Peter quietly called out, "Karen, you there?" His nanotech earpiece spurred to life, and Karen's voice filled his ears. "Of course, Peter, what can I do?" "Could you please do a scan of the man in front of me? I'm worried he has a concussion." Lifting the guy's hand, the nanotechnology danced from Peter's ear all the way to the stranger's body. Then Karen informed Peter, "There is no concussion, and you have dealt with all the life-threatening injuries. He is fine to sleep. I am noticing a tracking device in his helmet. It seems that someone is trying to locate him. Would you like me to scramble his address?" Peter thought about it for a second before confirming with Karen to scramble the address. Retracting the nanotech, Peter shuffled backwards until his back was pressed against the couch. He figured he'd wait until the man woke up. As Jason stirred awake, he instinctively brought his hand to his side. Last night he had a nasty gunshot wound that was bleeding rather profusely, and it was still sore. As he touched his side, though, there was a bandage and gauze wrapped around him. He assumed that Dick must have followed him to his safe house and taken him to the cave so Alfred could take care of him. He knew it was stupid to be annoyed with his brother for helping him, but now a safe house was compromised, and Jason's hand froze atop his bandaged wound. This gauze was well applied, but not done by Alfred. The man had patched Jason up enough for him to know. His eyes flew open and he grabbed for his gun, which was usually strapped to his leg, but the weapon was gone. Shit. Erratically looking around, Jason panicked and his vision started to get cloudy. Green invaded his view as he frustratingly cursed at himself. But then his eyes fell on the sleeping teenager in front of him, leaning against a couch, which was definitely not there the last time Jason was here. He had a roll of gauze in one hand and a small pile of blood-soaked bandages next to him. Looking around the room, he tried to spot his guns, but as he went to get up, the floorboard let out a loud creak. The teen's eyes shot open, and he looked around muttering a sleepy, "A bandage, right, change the bandage." Then he noticed that Jason was standing and he flew to his feet. "Mr. Red Hood, you're awake." Scoffing, Jason kept scanning the room for any of his weapons. "Please, Mr. is way too formal." Then he looked back toward the teenager. "What's your name, kid, and where'd you put my stuff?" Peter rubbed his eyes, acting extra tired as he stalled. He wasn't sure if he should tell the guy his name, especially since he seemed to be a big fan of guns. Instead of answering, Peter questioned Red Hood. "How is your side? You were bleeding a lot. The rest of it wasn't that bad. I hope you don't mind that I took off some of your clothes, and if by stuff you mean your guns, I hid them." "Now why the hell did you hide my stuff?" Hood groaned as he began limping around the room. "Because I thought, what if you wake up first? And in my experience, it's better to separate the trigger-happy dude and his guns." Peter followed Hood as he talked. Once in the hallway, he spun around to face Peter, and the teenager nearly ran straight into Jason's chest. "You know what? Just go get my stuff and then get out of here." Peter rolled his eyes before walking past Jason and turning into the living room area. He then opened the cupboard where he usually puts his backpack when he goes on patrol. He took out 4 guns. Then he walked past Jason into the room where he found the couch and lifted the tarp from the ground and revealed a handful of grenades. Placing the weapons ceremoniously on the floor in the living room, Peter grabbed a bag of clothes that hung from the hole in the wall and headed to the bathroom. Earlier, as he gathered the weapons, Karen had let Peter know that he needed to leave for school in 15 minutes. While Peter was in the bathroom, Jason looked around the place. He was planning on kicking the kid out, but the more he walked around, the harder he realized that would be. Clearly, the kid had been staying here for a while. When Jason first got this safe house, he locked the door of the room that had the couch out of fear of bedbugs. But clearly, the kid had not only broken the door and moved the couch, but he even cleaned it. The foil blanket that was thrown on the couch hinted that he was sleeping in it too. Additionally, the safe house was the cleanest Jason had ever seen. A pile of trash sat next to the bolted-shut fridge, and the newspapers that covered the few windows were gone. The kid had even found an old computer. The bags of clothes hanging off the protruding wood reminded Jason of a dresser. It felt surprisingly homey. Eventually, Peter emerged from the bathroom, his hair slightly wet and in a different outfit. Red Hood wordlessly pointed at Peter's hair, and the teen touched his hair as he told him, "A few days ago, I fixed the pipes in the bathroom. That way I could, wash my clothes in the tub and shower and stuff." As he finished talking, Hood ran his hands over his mask. "There is absolutely no way I can kick this kid out." Peter then walked straight across into the bedroom and grabbed his backpack off the floor. "Well, I have to go to school now, so don't break anything." He pointed at Red Hood, and suddenly Jason felt like the younger one. "And if you want a snack, I have some granola bars in the left cabinet above the sink." Before Hood could respond, Peter was already climbing out the window. Finally alone, Jason walked towards his stuff on the floor, but he nearly jumped out of his skin when Peter's head shot up from outside the window. "Also, if you want to use any of my first aid supplies, they are behind the couch or under the bathroom sink." "Okay, now I'm going to school." Regaining his composure, Jason started putting his hand grenades back onto his belt. As he grabbed his first gun, he froze. It was lighter than it should have been. He opened the cartridge and saw that all the bullets were gone. He hurriedly did the same thing for all his guns and found that Peter had taken out and done God knows what with his ammo. That fucker. As Peter walked to the subway station, with Red Hood's bullets in his backpack, he felt satisfied. Last night was surprisingly fulfilling. Sure, he didn't stop a bank robbery, but he saved someone. He saved someone the same way he couldn't be saved. And that thought was enough to put a smile on his face the whole way to school. Chapter 16, Parker Case. Summary. It's Peter's first day at Gotham Academy, and Tim starts to notice some things about Peter that don't make sense. Chapter text. Tim, Duke, and Stephanie were all chatting in front of the Gotham Academy school gate when Steph spotted Peter. He hadn't seemed to notice the group as he approached school, so she called out, "Peter, hey," excited for the first day. Tim and Duke had informed her of his recent distant activity, but she wasn't afraid of confrontation. The brunette boy turned to the trio and gave them a small smile. "Hey guys." Peter then walked up to them and they joined their conversation. As the bell rang, Tim groaned about how much they were dreading another school year. "I'm telling you, there is no way I'm going to survive all the way to senior year." Walking up the steps of the Gothic school, Peter enjoyed their conversation. However, in the back of his mind, he felt guilty. Guilty that he had ignored them for so long and is now acting like nothing happened, and guilty that he is letting himself get close to these people. They seemed so kind, and with Peter's luck, he knew there was a large chance they'd get hurt. Pushing those thoughts aside, Peter rejoined the conversation. "Don't worry about the science stuff, Duke. I can help with that." His nervousness dissolved, and Duke nudged Tim. "Thanks, cause this guy definitely isn't a good tutor." After that, Tim spent the rest of their walk explaining that he wasn't a bad teacher. Duke was a bad student. Duke eventually interrupted Tim, saying, "Okay, well, Peter and I have AP Chem, see ya." Then the two entered the class, shutting the door in Tim's face. Duke and Peter obviously sat together, and Peter was practically buzzing with excitement as he saw their wall of chemicals. Sure, they were locked in a glass cabinet, but that wouldn't be an issue. As the pair waited for the rest of the students to filter in, Peter was gawking at the classroom. Midtown wasn't a bad or poor high school by any means, but this was just different. While Midtown was all about science and new money, Gotham Academy screamed generational wealth. The class was structured like a Harvard University lecture room. There was a large whiteboard in the center of class, with a desk in front of it. Elevated rows of tables surrounded the teacher's area. After some time, Duke pulled Peter out of his trance as he pulled open a desk drawer, telling him, "If you think that's cool, look at this." Inside the drawer was a variety of small vials with chemicals already prepared. It would be so painfully easy to make web fluid here. Bearing a $1,000,000 smile, Peter told his friend, "You know what, I think I might like this school." Lunch solidified this belief as he walked into the cafeteria. After AP Lang with Tim, the black-haired boy told his friend, "The best thing about this place is the food, trust me," and boy was he right. Calling it a school cafeteria seemed like an insult. The place was enormous, and instead of stale chips and sloppy joes, there were things like grilled salmon, artisan pasta, and oh my god, what kind of school has lobster mac and cheese? After getting a plate of spaghetti and meatballs and Caesar salad, Peter sat at a table with Duke, Tim, Steph, and a few other kids. As the group began to eat their lunch, Tim noticed how desperate Peter was shoveling food into his mouth. The brunette was nodding along to their conversation, as the red tomato sauce began to stain the corners of his mouth. He had dozens of questions about Peter Parker since he dethroned Tim as the top student at Gotham Academy, but despite his deep research, Tim had found nothing. Well, he found nothing insanely suspicious. The kid had a social security number, bank statements, and even a minute social media presence. Regardless, something about Peter seemed off. The abundance of medical supplies he caught the guy purchasing, a handful of injuries that all had the same excuse of "I'm clumsy," and the fact that he was devouring his food like he hadn't seen a meal in days sent alarm bells off in Tim's head. Before Tim had the chance to get a word out of Peter, though, the lunch bell rang. "See you in photography," Peter cheerily told Tim, and part of the teenager felt bad for investigating the guy. Since all of Peter's classes were AP, he had a busy day, but fortunately he had already taken all these classes and harder ones back home. To be honest, he could skip the whole school year, come back for the final, and still get an A. Well, he had taken all the classes except for the one he was currently in, photography. Peter liked taking pictures. It wasn't a big deal or anything. But when he was talking to Peter too, he mentioned how his job was a photographer, and Peter figured it wouldn't hurt to take a few classes. As the teacher was giving her laid-back lecture, Tim noticed Peter falling asleep. "Dude, don't fall asleep on the first day." His eyes shot open and he muttered, "Yeah, you're right." Chuckling silently, Tim patted Peter on the back, telling him, "Don't worry, she's super chill. Most days she just lets her students free in the courtyard and says to build your portfolio." Leaning into his chair, Peter yawned as he said something that Tim's pretty sure was awesome. Peter did end up falling asleep in class. Around 20 minutes before class ended, he put his head down and knocked out. Tim sneakily took out his phone and was about to snap a photo when Peter's hand caught his eye. One of his hands had a distinct red tint to the tips of his fingers, and although the dark red stain under his nails might have been confused with some spaghetti sauce from lunch, Tim instantly recognized it: dried blood. No matter how much Tim wanted to wake Peter up and question him about it, the teenager knew better than that. Instead, he let his friend sleep and mentally stored the information in his Parker folder. After the first day of school, Duke had some student council responsibilities to tend to, and Tim offered to help, so it was just Peter and Steph at a booth in Batburger. "So what do you think of Gotham Academy?" Steph asked as she took a bite of her burger. "It's way nicer than my old school," Peter excitedly told her, "and the science classrooms are all awesome. Plus, I talked to my physics teacher, Mr. Hayes, about the engineering lab cause I passed it on the way to his class. He said I could sign up for the Wednesday block period study hall thing. I don't really know what he was talking about, but he said I could work in the lab if I get in." Steph laughed and then politely explained that on Wednesdays, they don't have their normal periods 1-6. Instead, they have a single class where students get hands-on experience. Peter recalled Duke mentioning something like that when they gave him a tour of the school. Peter liked Stephanie. She was easy to get along with, and when Peter asked her how she liked her classes, she told him, "School's easy, dude. I have this foolproof plan on how to succeed." She whipped her hands on her napkin before dramatically waving one finger. "Step 1, go to school." She raised another finger. "Step 2, celebrate passing school." She smiled and Peter shook his head. "Hey, it works every year. Don't knock it till you try it." The rest of their lunch was filled with both the kids trying to impress each other with their equally sarcastic jokes. Walking towards the subway station alone, Peter could feel a pair of eyes on him. Testing to see if this person was really following him, he took 4 right turns. When he felt the eyes still glued to him, he simply pretended like he was lost, asking a nearby person for directions. Of course, they just told him to fuck off. As he continued walking, Peter knew needed to get a look at this person. He couldn't lead them back to the place he was staying, but no normal person would be able to detect this gaze. To make matters worse, Karen had just told Peter the nanotech was running dangerously low on battery. If Spider-Man was going to go out tonight, she couldn't waste energy helping him back to Crime Alley. When Peter finally ended up on a rather empty sidewalk, he bent down to tie his shoe. As he pulled the laces tight, his head twitched to the left just a bit. With the rooftops in sight, his spidey sense flared up, alerting Peter to a masked set of eyes. The figure wore a cowl, but not like Batman. It was Red Robin. Again, Peter thought, sure, Red Robin had originally followed Spider-Man, but he had proven annoying either way. Wait, what if Red Robin knows I'm Spider-Man? It made sense to Peter. Single was the only daytime hero in Gotham, so why else would Red Robin be out? Instead of going back to Crime Alley, Peter opted to explore more of Gotham. He walked aimlessly for an hour, and everywhere he went, so did Red Robin. But as Peter looked through a store window and saw the time, 6:07, he knew he needed to get the apartment. His iron spidey suit needed to charge, and with the poor electricity the apartment had, it would take longer than normal. If he charged it for 2 hours, it would have just enough battery to last tonight's patrol. But that also meant he'd have to leave all the nanotech, even Karen, at the apartment while he went to school tomorrow. Okay, Peter decided, time to lose this guy. As Tim sat perched on a rooftop, he started down at the sea of people. He was suspicious of Peter and he wanted answers, so he might have lied about helping Duke. Instead of staying at school, he headed to the manor and got into his suit. His timing was perfect because right as he arrived at Batburger, his 2 friends were finishing their meals. Watching Peter try to find his way to the subway station was painful. This guy is definitely new to Gotham, Tim thought as he watched Peter get told fuck off after asking for directions. Popping a piece of gum in his mouth, Tim continued his Parker stakeout. The stakeout was starting off rather fruitless. Peter had just been walking around Gotham. He never showed any interest in getting home, nor did he buy anything from the stores he walked out of. But eventually, the teenager stopped in front of a store and seemed to be thinking about something. Tim prayed he was going to buy something as he blew a bubble. But by the time the bubble popped, Peter was gone. Jumping to his feet, Tim scanned the crowd. Eventually, he found Peter. He was turning left down the street. How the hell did he get there so fast? Tim wondered as he leapt from one rooftop to the next. It took a second to catch up to his smaller friend. Sure, he wasn't sprinting, but he was walking pretty damn fast. As he started making his way to the rougher part of Gotham, Peter suddenly walked into an alley. Tim hurriedly followed because if he couldn't find the subway station, he certainly didn't know how bad of an idea this was. Looking down into the alley, Peter was face to face with 2 men, one of which had a gun. Shit, Tim muttered, using his grappling hook to land between the muggers and his friend. Red Robin, huh? One of the men scoffed. What? Batman gets sick of metas and kicks Signal off the team. Now I just wanted some daytime action, Red Robin shrugged. Now you guys get to rethink your life choices. One of you has a gun but is standing too close, bad move. The other, you keep shifting your weight, which means you're already thinking of running. Smart, so how about we speed that up? Seeing that Red Robin was distracted by the criminals, Peter turned on his heels and bolted. He made it to the apartment in a record-breaking 12 minutes. Once inside, he asked Karen, "You said this place has electricity. Where is the strongest current coming from?" She then politely directed him to the fridge. Using his super strength, Peter pulled the fridge away from the wall, revealing an outlet. Smiling at his discovery, Peter went and grabbed his duffel bag with the iron Spidey suit charger. He had hidden it in a narrow closet near the bathroom. Peter set up the charger next to the pile of trash and put the fridge back. Now all he had to do was wait, and so he did a few simple homework assignments. Eventually the sun set, all his homework was done, and the suit had enough battery to get him through patrol. Suiting up, Peter covered the charger with the trash in case Red Hood came back. "Where to, Karen?" Peter asked, swinging out of the apartment window. Chapter 17, Confronting Red Robin. Summary. Peter's first week of school goes better than expected, but he can't help but notice that a certain vigilante. Chapter text. The next few days weren't too bad. Surprisingly, school helped Peter. It gave him a place to meet people and opportunities to reestablish a life. He had met some really fun people, especially at the Wednesday engineering lab. Sometimes it was hard though, like when he was helping his friend Laura in the lab. She brought an old phone to play with, and after Peter showed her how to take it apart, she shook his hand, joking that she appreciated the opportunity to work with Peter. But when she extended her hand, Peter thought of Ned. Almost instinctively, he started their handshake, but quickly saved himself by patting her on the shoulder. Besides the friends and the fact that he could make all the web fluid he wanted, Peter loved school cause he could hide from Red Robin. For some reason, the vigilante was stalking him. At one point, when the photography teacher released the kids in the courtyard to build their portfolio, Peter asked Tim if he wanted to sneak out. The vigilante always found him at the same time, right after school ended, so Peter assumed an early release would throw him off. Tim agreed and the boys escaped school, but the minute he was alone, Red Robin was right behind him. Peter had super senses, for crying out loud. He knew that there was danger in Gotham that would appreciate Red Robin's attention. He had spent this week either accidentally walking into crime scenes for the hero to deal with, or straight up using evasion tactics Natasha taught him. He never thought he'd be using Black Widow's skills to escape a dude named after a burger joint, but this was what his life had come to. Sometimes Tim loved secret identities. When Peter asked to sneak out of 6th period, he obviously said yes. 1, because who wants to be in that class, and 2, because that was more time to build his Parker case. Today would be no different than the rest of the week. Red Robin would be out during the day, but only make an appearance if Peter happened to walk into the middle of a crime. Tim prayed they'd be released into the courtyard again during photography class, but was let down when he walked in and the projector was on. Today they actually had to take notes, which was horrible for Tim because he had given his pencil case to Steph. She forgot hers at home, and he assumed he would be doing nothing in 6th. Peter was walking out the door, hall pass in hand, probably going to the bathroom, when Tim called out, "Peter, can I borrow a pencil?" He clasped his hands together as if praying, and Peter nodded to his friend. "Yeah, I should have an extra in my bag." Tim flashed his friend a thumbs up as his head ducked under their desks. Grabbing Peter's bag and looking into the front pocket, he saw nothing but the scraps Peter used to make himself a watch. Then he unzipped the main part and looked inside but saw no pencil case. Assuming any loose pencils would be at the bottom, Tim blindly stuck his arm into the bag. Running his hand along the bottom of the bag, Tim froze. He immediately pulled out what his hand touched. It was a bullet, but not a normal one of Red Hood's rubber bullets. Using his phone flashlight to look for any more, he pulled out a handful of ammo. There were wood and rubber bullets. He even had some of Jason's trick bullets. How the hell did Peter get Red Hood's taser and smoke rounds? Tim internally questioned. The ammunition looked semi-normal, and other people might have not noticed that they belonged to Red Hood, but Tim literally helped manufacture these things. He knew exactly who they belonged to. Knowing Peter would return any second, Tim poured the bullets back into his backpack and then spotted a pencil. He grabbed it and gently put Peter's bag on the floor. When Peter returned, he asked Tim, "You good?" "Yeah, I think I just ate too much pasta at lunch." Tim lied through his teeth. "Well, at least it's Friday," Peter offered lamely, and Tim nodded along. After finding the bullets in Peter's bag, Tim was not going to let Peter shake him off today. He needed answers. It was one thing to be able to lose a specially trained tactile expert like himself, but having the ammo of a lethal ex-crime lord was another. When the final bell rang, Tim waved goodbye to Peter before taking off to suit up. He had parked one of his cars in an alley by the school and changed in there. Finding Peter easily, he threw back a 5-hour energy shot, ready to not let Peter out of his sight. After about 2 hours, Red Robin was proud of himself. He had stopped carjackings and muggings and still didn't lose Peter. But there still was one thing Tim couldn't get over. Every day Peter acted like he had all the time in the world, but the minute it hit 6, he'd be running off. "Oh, time please," Red Robin asked, not daring to look at his watch. Letting out an annoyed sigh, she responded, "Double R, this is the 5th time you've asked. It's 5:42. Thanks was all he said, and then Peter did something different. He talked to someone. It wasn't anyone Tim had seen him interact with in the past. To make things worse, the guy aggressively shoved Peter into an alley and followed him in as he crashed. That was Red Robin's cue. Leaving school, Peter knew he was gonna talk to Red Robin today, but he figured he'd make the guy do some actual work first. He had led him into a few petty crimes, carjackings, muggings, stuff like that. After the vigilante dealt with it, Peter would let the guy catch up to him again. Looking down at the electronic watch he made with some tools he found dumpster diving, Peter noted the time 5:42. He liked to be in the apartment by 6:00 to give himself 2 hours for food, homework, and tinkering before patrol. Approaching a guy his age, Peter had his money in his pocket. "Hey man, excuse me," the guy looked at him. "Would you push me into the alley behind me? I'll give you 10 bucks. Back in Queens, this request would have earned him a few odd looks, but not in Gotham. The guy shrugged and then shoved Peter hard onto the floor. He then walked towards him, and Peter pulled out the promised money. Thanks. The kid just laughed, sure dude. Right on cue, Peter heard Red Robin land behind him. Are you okay there, kid? Red Robin asked as he approached. Peter got up, whipped the dirt off himself, and then looked at Red Robin. The guy was a few inches shorter than Peter, and Peter was grateful he didn't have to look up at the guy. Why are you following me? The question obviously shocked Red Robin as he opened his mouth before shutting it. I don't know what you're talking about. Really? Cause I take a left, you take a left. I stop at a store, you think the rooftop you're on is suddenly really interesting. I end up in an alley and you make a dramatic entrance. Peter let his words soak in for a minute before continuing. So what's the deal, Red? You doing a community outreach program for lost tourists or something? Peter ended his rant by crossing his arms and raising his eyebrow at the vigilante. Instead of answering his question, though, Red Robin just asked his own. Why do you disappear every day before 6? What are you running from? Where do you live? As Peter rolled his eyes, Red Robin kept going. Additionally, why do you hang around the Wayne kids so much? That last question was just for Tim's personal knowledge. He wanted to know if Peter actually liked hanging out with his family. After his ghosting special at the end of summer, Tim was slightly worried he was using them. While all the other questions bounced off Peter's carefree facade, the last one made him twitch. Are you following them too? I swear they have nothing to do with anything. If you want to investigate me, leave them out of it. He pursed his lips into a thin line. If you are that suspicious, I'll stop hanging out with them. Tim didn't want that. In fact, he wanted the opposite. They all enjoyed Peter's company, and he was a perfect match for their friend group. No, you don't have to do that. The atmosphere was stiff after that. Tim wanted to get more information, but he felt bad. He was making his friend worried and probably scared. He would have to leave his Parker case alone for a bit. Signing, Tim pinched the bridge of his nose. Look, I was just suspicious because that family has dealt with a lot of corrupt people trying to get into their inner circle. But it seems I was wrong. I won't monitor you anymore, okay? Reaching his arm out for a truce, Peter extended his hand. After shaking hands, Tim turned around to grapple off, but was interrupted by his friend. Wait. Tim glanced over his shoulder and immediately felt like a jerk. Peter looked upset. Did one of the Wayne kids ask you to investigate me? It was obvious what he was asking. Do they trust me? I mean, I know I don't have as much money as them, but they know I wasn't using them for that, right? Peter's brow was furrowed as he talked, and he shook his head slightly. Okay, I'm such a dick. Tim cursed himself. No, they didn't ask, but I'm familiar with some of the family, and when they mentioned you, I just wanted to be safe. Turning to face Peter again, he pulled a small card out of his belt. And anyone pushes you in an alley for real, or if you need anything, give me a call. He let his words sink in before continuing, and I can see that I had no reason to worry. It's almost 6, you should get going. Goodbye, Peter. Chapter 18, Kryptonite and Crocodiles. Chapter text. Peter thought about what Red Robin said the entire walk to the apartment. He said he was familiar with the family, so the second he got inside the apartment, he sat down on the floor and logged into his computer. First, he looked into Red Robin and Bruce Wayne, and it turns out Wayne funds Batman's activities. Alarm bells rang in Peter's head as he thought about how things worked at home. Tony funded Iron Man, Tony funded the Avengers, and the Wakandans funded Black Panther. There was a fat chance that Bruce Wayne wasn't just funding the vigilante, but he was the Bat. Secondly, Peter looked into Red Robin's past stalking efforts. He wanted to see if he did this to all new friends of the Wayne family, or if it was only the poor ones. Surprisingly, there was an article titled, Is Red Robin Stalking You? Find out if he's interested. It wasn't exactly informative. It was a detailed dating history of the vigilante. Peter was going to ignore it when he remembered that Red Robin gave him a card. As he dug his hands into his pockets to find it, he thought, no way. It's not his shit, it is. The card was practically blank, except for a phone number written in the middle. He couldn't wait to tell his friends that a vigilante had a crush on him, but then he froze. If Bruce Wayne was Batman, then his children might be his sidekicks. After thinking about it for a second, Peter sent an email to Duke, Steph, and Tim. Hey guys, want to go get some food tomorrow to celebrate the first week of school. Also, I have something to tell you guys. Steph, you'll want to hear it. Plus, I have no plans. Please save me, TT. Peter. He'd have to test his theory at lunch tomorrow. But tonight, he needed to focus on one thing at a time. Approaching the pile of trash, he dug his iron Spidey suit charger out. He hadn't taken any nanotech to school the past 2 days to let the suit fully charge. It was now at percent 86, and he had made a few new web fluid cartridges at school. The sun was still out, but he figured Spidey could make an early appearance. Swinging through the city was so freeing. It gives him a sense of peace despite his chaotic life. The wind rushing past, the weightlessness, and the breathtaking skyline make it his perfect escape until duty calls again. Enjoying the daytime shift, Peter spotted a child running into the street. Like clockwork, a truck was speeding down the street at the same time. In one swift movement, Peter swooped down and swung the girl back onto the sidewalk. Her glasses were a little crooked, so Peter fixed them for her as he crouched down. "Okay, sweetie, you need to remember to look both ways, and don't cross the street without an adult." She looked at Peter and then tucked her dark brown hair behind her ears. "Okay, Spider-Man, I promise I won't do it again." As a woman came running up, her mother, Karen, spoke up. "Peter, it appears that truck was just involved in a bank robbery." Nodding, Peter checked on the girl again and saw her giggling as her mother smothered her with hugs. He reached out his arm and let his webs take him away. Flying through the air, he heard a distinct, "Thank you, Spider-Man," and he smiled brightly under his mask. Stopping the truck was easy. Once he caught the car with his bare hands, the guys in the vehicle surrendered almost immediately. The rest of his day shift was easy. No big bad guys trying to blow anything up, so when Peter spotted Signal on a rooftop, he decided to say hello. Landing softly behind the guy, Peter realized the other hero didn't know he was there yet. Creeping up behind the guy, Peter poked his head over his shoulder. "Whatcha looking at?" Signal stiffened before he let out a breath. "Hello, Spider-Man." Peter liked Signal. Whenever he was near any other members of the Bat-Fam, his spidey sense tingled in anticipation. But when he was with Signal, it calmed down as if he was talking to a friend. Signal was the only other vigilante Spider-Man didn't mind talking with. "What are you still doing out? I never catch you when it's dark out," Peter questioned the man in yellow. "I was just dealing with something, but I don't really want to call for backup." Signal waved one of his eskrima sticks at the bunch of guys suspiciously loading things into cars. "Well, I'm here and I don't mind helping," Peter offered. He figured he'd get turned down since as much as he avoided the bats, they avoided him, but he was surprised when Signal actually smiled softly and told him, "You know what, why not?" As Signal told him the plan, a bright green crystal caught his eye. His spidey sense told him it was powerful, and suddenly Peter was 15 years old with Ned playing with alien technology. He was definitely going to try and swipe some of the material to play with later. "They won't expect both of us together, so you go in and distract them. While you do that, I'll come from behind." Peter refocused and nodded along. Signal then scanned the city to make sure there were no civilians that could get hurt, and then gave Spider-Man the cue. Hanging upside down, Peter descended between two of the thugs. "All right, fellas, I was just swinging by, but then I saw the shady warehouse, the goons with guns, and the illegal-looking tech, so I figured, hey, why not crash the party?" As Peter spoke, one of the men tried to punch him in the face, but Peter just caught his first and pushed him back. Flipping in front of all the men, Peter began making a scene, trying to draw out as many goons as he could. "Are we smuggling weapons? Rare Pokémon cards? Please tell me it's not bootleg Batman merch." He gets really cranky about that. One of the men began to raise a gun as he yelled, "Who the hell?" Peter didn't let him finish. Instead, he swiftly webbed up the weapon. "Rude, I'm talking. Anyway, where was I? Right, you guys need a better hideout. This place, classic villain aesthetic. But the smell, I'd rather fight the lizard in a sewer." All the men reached for their weapons, and Peter still hadn't seen Signal, so he knew he needed to waste more time. He spotted a forklift and flipped on top of it before swinging inside and stomping on the horn. "Whoa, whoa, whoa, guns? Really? Are we just skipping the getting to know each other phase? What if I was here to sell Girl Scout cookies? You don't want to miss out on Thin Mints." And then Spider-Man spotted Signal emerging from the shadows, and not in a sneaky way. Like the guy's body was literally forming out of the shadows. It freaked Peter out a bit. Spider-Man then webbed the top of the crate lid and swung it open, revealing the green glowing crystal. That's definitely not gluten-free. The minute the crate opened, Signal began taking out the men from behind, and Peter webbed up the others. Since he finished dealing with his men early, Peter grabbed a few of the glowing crystals. Then he went over to help Signal. The guy didn't need it, but it just meant they both could leave faster. Looking at the disarmed goons, Signal smiled, but then he glanced at Peter's hand. Peter's spidey sense sparked to life instantly, telling him Signal was a threat. "Why do you have that?" the yellow hero asked defensively. Confused, Peter chose the honest answer. "Well, it's something I've never seen before, and I want to run some tests on it." Signal's shoulders relaxed just a tad. "You've never seen kryptonite." Peter just shrugged. "Our team has already run all the possible tests on it, don't bother. I can tell you what you want to know." Signal extended his hand for the gem, but his reaction only made Peter more interested in the glowing green item. "In my experience, it's not the best idea to blindly give up powerful things like this. So thanks, but I'll do my own research." Peter was acting defensive, but he didn't care. "Besides, you have all this to investigate." Peter gestured to the multiple crates of kryptonite. Signal was staring hard at Peter through the mask. Sighing, Peter told Signal, "Look, dude, I really enjoyed working with you. But you need to trust me, okay? I mean, I trust you. And I've been helping Gotham for nearly a month. All I'm trying to do is investigate suspicious material." Signal thought about it for a second and then lowered his weapons, which he had been slowly raising. "Fine, you're right." Walking past Peter, he patted him on the shoulder. "The bat is gonna be here in a minute if you want to get out of here. Thanks, Spider-Man." Peter appreciated Signal's response and warning. He nodded thankfully towards his friend before taking off. The rest of his patrol wasn't too bad, except for the fact his spidey sense was going off more than usual. Something underground was growing, and eventually Peter had enough time to investigate. It was well past midnight when Peter pulled up the sewer cover. He landed in the sewer with a soft thud and a small splash. It was larger than a normal sewage drain should be, and Peter let his spidey sense direct him towards the danger. Once he was in a large open area, where sewage would cascade down a drain, the ground rumbled beneath his feet. From the darkness emerges a hulking figure, towering and covered in scales and muscles. The huge figure looked at Peter and laughed. "Thought I'd find something fun tonight. You're the perfect prey." Peter had recognized the scaly monster, but couldn't put his finger on the name. "It's Killer Croc, Peter. He is similar to Dr. Connors, except he was born with the mutation." Nodding, Peter looked back at the criminal. "Oh, don't you worry, big guy. I'm gonna make this quick. I'll even throw in a free lizard joke for you." Killer Croc roared and lunged forward with terrifying speed, swiping his claws toward Peter. Clearly, he didn't like the lizard joke. Croc's claws tore into the ground, sending a shockwave through the sewer. Spider-Man flipped over the wave of gray water coming his way, sticking to the wall. Croc then slammed his fist into the top of the sewer, crumbling the ceiling on top of Peter. The force of the blast knocked him down, a few 100 pounds of concrete pressing into him. Spider-Man groaned as he was crushed and realized that he needed a more even playing field. Plus, if he defeated Croc here, no one would be able to reach him. Spider-Man spotted a sewage cover above them and launched himself upward. Emerging from the drain, he baited Croc. "What, too scared to fight me up here? It's fine, I get it, performance issues." "You talk too much, time to feed," Croc yelled, charging upward and bursting through the ground, sending pieces of the ground flying everywhere. He began swinging his massive fists at Spider-Man, but none of them landed as he skillfully evaded everything, swinging himself out of reach. At one point, Croc raised his fists, and just as Peter was about to swing away, a nearby heartbeat caught his attention. Whipping his head around, he saw a group of people. 2 teens were trying to help their friend, whose leg was stuck under a piece of debris. Peter could sense Croc's fist nearing himself, but if dodged it, there was a chance Croc would hit the building behind him and cause an old stone gargoyle to fall onto the people. He knew he could take the punch, so he did. As Killer Croc's fist hit Spider-Man's face, the distinct sound of bone breaking rang in his ears. He flew across the alley and ended up landing in front of the teens. Placing one hand on the piece of concrete trapping the teen to the floor, Peter flung the object at Croc, slamming it into the giant's head. Jumping on top of Killer Croc, Peter began webbing him up and throwing a few solid punches. He didn't want to hurt the guy too much, so he used just enough strength to knock the guy out. After that fight, his spidey sense reset to its regular Gotham level of quiet. Spider-Man decided that since there were a few other bats out tonight, and he had been out since the sun was up, he could retire early. Swinging back to his apartment, Peter could feel intense bruises forming on his face and abdomen from his fight with Killer Croc. Peter was finally back in Crime Alley, but something was wrong. There was a heartbeat in his apartment. Chapter 19, A Caring Houseguest. Summary. After Peter's fight with Killer Croc, things get a bit complicated. Chapter text. Since it would be safer for Peter Parker's apartment to be found rather than Spider-Man's, he retracted his suit. The kryptonite from earlier was now in the pocket of his civilian clothing. Climbing up the fire escape, he made sure to be as quiet as possible. As he neared the window, Peter heard someone mutter, "Where did the kid put them?" Peter instantly relaxed as he realized it was Red Hood. Sure, the guy was a crazy ex-crime lord, but he seemed to have a soft spot for teens, so Peter was probably safe. Crawling through the window, he took a look around trying to identify where the guy was, and when his head popped out of the hole in the wall, Peter nearly jumped out of his skin. Sure, he had the ability to catch himself, but it would look pretty suspicious of a scrawny teenager suddenly contorted into a handstand to catch himself. so Peter just let himself hit the floor. Red Hood stepped through the hole in the wall and scoffed, well, that was graceful. As Peter groaned on the floor, he walked up and extended his hand. Come on, kid, at least you didn't land on anything sharp. Trust me, I've had worse landings. So have I, Peter thought. Taking his gloved hand, Peter rubbed the dirt off his hands. Looking at Red Hood, he asked, "What are you doing here?" And at the same time, Red Hood demanded, "Who did that to your face?" "I don't know what you're talking about," Peter responded as he lowered his head. Of course he'd have visible injuries from the fight. That's literally the reason he ended his patrol. Trying to walk around Red Hood, Peter told the larger man, "I've got stuff to do, so could you leave please?" Red Hood wasn't letting him off that easily though and grabbed his arm. "You know exactly what I'm talking about, and why are you out so late? There's a curfew, you know." Peter rolled his eyes as he yanked his arm out of Hood's grip. "You're not my dad, dude. I'm not telling you anything." Walking away from Red Hood, he cursed himself as he walked, caused to be honest it was more of a limp. "Kid, listen," but Peter quickly cut him off. "I'm not a kid." He didn't know why, but Red Hood's sudden interest in his well-being pissed Peter off. He had been managing things alone this whole time, so why does this guy think he can suddenly walk in and act like he knows everything? Ignoring Red Hood, Peter grabbed a bag of clothes and entered the bathroom. While changing, Peter realized how annoying super healing could be. Anyone else would have a light red bruise, at worst, right after that fight, but with his accelerated healing, his skin was already purple. It was even green in some spots. His eye was a patchy deep red and one cheek was swollen. Digging through the plastic bag, he groaned as he realized he didn't have a shirt. All his clothes were already in the sink, waiting to be washed, and he could hear Red Hood outside, so he couldn't just walk out and get a shirt. Creaking the door open a bit, Peter called out, "Could you hand me another plastic bag? I need a shirt." Red Hood grabbed the bag but stopped a few feet out of Peter's reach. "Are you serious?" Peter asked through gritted teeth. Red Hood just perked his head to the side. Since he had no choice, Peter opened the door fully and quickly lunged forward, grabbing the bag. Jason wasn't sure what he was expecting to see, but it wasn't that. He knew the kid was hiding something, but when he walked out and had first shaped bruises on his stomach, Jason didn't know what to do. Then the kid turned around and it just got worse. His back was covered in another dark injury. Something must have been thrown on him, judging by the shape. Originally, he planned on asking the kid where his ammo was, but when he came to the safe house and no one was there, he just began to snoop. To be honest, he assumed the kid had run off after he showed up. So imagine Jason's shock when he sauntered in, colorfully bruised, past midnight. Eventually, the kid emerged from the bathroom, and it was clear he had no intention of talking to Jason. He walked straight towards the couch, and Jason didn't miss how he subconsciously grabbed his side as he sat down. "Is it a gang issue?" Jason asked from behind the couch. After receiving no answer, he continued asking questions, but every time he got no answer. "Look, kid," and he didn't miss how he scoffed as he called him kid. "I get this place is your home, but..." This instantly got a reaction, and the kid swiveled his head around to glare at Jason. "This place isn't my home." Walking around to sit on the armrest, Jason quipped, "Oh, so you just eat, sleep, and do homework here?" The kid didn't miss a beat and nodded. "Okay then, so what is it, since it's not your home?" The kid thought about it for a minute before looking away and saying, "It's my hideout." "Your hideout?" "Yup. What are you hiding from?" The kid stared into space, his face turning colder than before. "Bad guys." The answer was so childish that part of Jason wanted to laugh, but then he remembered what was hiding beneath his gray shirt. Instead, he took out one of his guns and offered it to the kid. "It's empty, but I know you have the bullets somewhere in here." Jason didn't know why he was doing this. Giving one of his personal guns to a teenager was dangerous and stupid, but then the kid shook his head. "No, if I use that on them, then I'm no better." "Kid, if you keep letting people do that to you, you'll end up dead in a ditch." Jason definitely wasn't one to sugarcoat things, so why start now? But he noticed how the kid flinched at his words, muttering, "I don't let them do anything. Sometimes it's just hard to get away." Jason twitched at his words. They seemed so naive and sad, and Jason felt like an asshole for saying that. "Look, I get it, you don't want to use the gun, but what happens when whoever is beating you pulls one out? And before you say that won't happen, it's Gotham. Getting a gun is as easy as getting a newspaper." Jason was now sitting next to the kid on the couch. I just don't like guns, okay? I've got bad memories associated with M." The kid then curled his knees up to his chest and hugged himself. When he did this, he reminded Jason of Damien. He thought of his little brother, curled up in a ball after a bad nightmare back at the League of Assassins, haunted by the memory of the people he was forced to kill. So Jason put the gun away, leaned his back against the couch, and asked, Could you tell me about the guy that gave you those bruises at least? The kid just shook his head again, and Jason ran his hands over his mask. Why the hell not? There's nothing you can do, and trust me, I've had worse than tonight. The fact that the kid smiled as he said this, the fact that he said it with such certainty, pissed Jason off. This wasn't something a teenager should be proud of. Sure, he and the other Robins have had days where they sat down and compared scars, but that was different. After that, Jason didn't know what to say. He wasn't good with words. That was always Dick's job, so he just waited until the kid fell asleep. And when he did, Jason decided that the kid could keep the damn bullets, and part of him hoped he'd use them. Climbing out of the apartment, Jason took off towards the cave. After all, he still needed more bullets. The cave was empty when he arrived, and Jason was grateful. He didn't feel like talking to anyone, especially Bruce. He headed straight towards Tim's workstation. The brothers hadn't always gotten along well, but the one thing they could agree on was weapon manufacturing. He began tinkering to make new trick bullets and had completed 2 sets of cryo rounds when he heard Tim enter. "What to doing here?" "Nothing," Jason dryly responded. He didn't want to explain everything. "Are you making new bullets?" Tim asked, pulling up a chair. "Nope. Dude, I can literally see them," Tim said as he picked up the bullet for emphasis. "Then why ask stupid questions?" Tim didn't respond for a minute, and Jason hoped he'd leave. But of course it wasn't that simple. "Did you lose your ammo?" Tim questioned, spinning in his chair. "No." "Did someone steal your ammo?" "No." "Then why do you need new bullets?" "I don't." Did Jason cut Tim off as he spun around, chucking a screwdriver at his head. "Do you ever shut up?" When Jason saw that his brother was just going to keep bothering him until he gave a reason, he sighed and turned back to his work. "I gave them to a kid." "You gave your specially made, one-of-a-kind $1,000 bullets to a kid?" Tim walked around the table so that Jason had to look at him. "Do you realize how stupid that is?" Before Tim could try to scold Jason further, he spoke up. "Kids being abused." Immediately, Tim shut up and looked a little pale. What? How do you know?" "I ran into him a few times. He's pretty damn good at hiding injuries, and he was covered in bruises tonight. He wouldn't give me a name because he has the same morals as B. I let him keep the bullets, so if he happens to use them on the bastard, I'll be able to figure out who they are and finish the job." Jason didn't look at Tim once as he explained. If he did, then he knew his brother would ask questions he didn't have the answer to, like what's the kid's name. When Tim heard Jason say that Peter was being abused, he felt sick. He wanted Jason to be wrong, but the more he thought about it, the more it made sense. Every day he'd head home at the same time, sometimes running if he was late. He always had bandages in his backpack, and most days he was wearing them. All those medical supplies they caught him buying, and the fact that he was scared to go to a clinic. Even his sudden disappearance at the end of summer made sense. Jason said he was good at hiding injuries, so he must have gotten hurt pretty badly to not show his face for a week. Suddenly, a twisted thought popped into Tim's mind. If he's bruised really bad right now, then there's a chance it's because he got home late today, because Red Robin just had to talk to him. Tim wanted to check in on his friend, but he didn't even know where he lived, so instead he decided to message him. As soon as he opened his email, though, there was a letter waiting for him. "Hey guys, sorry, I know I said I was free tomorrow, or well, technically today since it's 3 a.m., but I can't go out anymore. PLS, forgive me. Peter." Tim slammed his head on his desk hard. Chapter 20, Give Him a Call. Summary. Peter tests his theory that Red Robin is Tim and also figures out about a big bust. Chapter text. Usually Peter would have gone out despite his injuries, but with the way his face looked, his excuse of "I fell down the stairs" wouldn't work. His eye wasn't swollen shut anymore, but it was still heavily bruised. His friends were super understanding, although Steph was spamming him, demanding to know about what he mentioned in his previous email. Anyways, instead of going out to eat on Saturday, Peter tinkered with the weird green crystal instead. His analysis showed that kryptonite was a weapon against Superman. It heavily weakened the guy. For no related reason, Peter wanted to try to make some tools out of it. The only reason he began to play with the material was because it reminded him of his times with Ned, and Nightwing had told him not to run away from this feeling. So instead of just letting it sit in a plastic bag with his clothes, Peter went dumpster diving on Saturday. By nightfall, he had attached shards of the material to Droney, his drone spider that Mr. Stark and he had made back home. He tried to make it similar to Falcon's red wing. That way he could leave it at the apartment, but still use it if he was far away. When Sunday came around, Peter was healed enough to go out. Tim brought along his friend Connor too, since they had plans previously, but he was eager to see Peter again. By the time Peter got to Batburger, the gang was all sitting in a booth. As he walked up to his friends he waved, "Sorry were you waiting long." "Now you're fine, dude, we just got here." Duke smiled at him and scooted over to make room. Before Peter had a chance to sit down, Tim asked, "What happened here?" gesturing towards Peter's jaw. After his fight with Killer Croc, his jaw had broken. The bones had healed pretty fast, but now Peter had to deal with the bruising. "Oh, I slipped going up the stairs last night." He wasn't the best liar, but he had slipped last night, so he didn't feel too bad. Tim hummed in response, but began running his eyes over Peter, analyzing him. The guy sitting next to Tim, who was wearing a leather jacket and had a few piercings, nodded towards Peter. "Name's Connor. You from around here?" No, I'm from Queens. You." As Peter spoke, he noticed how his spidey sense was extremely quiet, especially for Gotham. It was similar to how he felt around some of the Avengers' other heroes. "Originally from Smallville, but I move around a lot," the guy responded as he took a sip from Tim's drink. Okay, now what were you talking about in your email?" "I've been dying." Steph practically lunged across the table, face to face with Peter. "Oh right," Peter smirked as he looked at his friends. Time to test his theory that the Wayne kids were Gotham's heroes. "Okay, so I think Red Robin has a crush on me." The entire table was deadly silent. Connor slowly turned to look at Tim, and Tim was staring at Peter with his mouth agape. "How did you come to that conclusion?" Duke asked as he stifled a laugh. "Okay, hear me out," Peter reasoned as Steph was soundlessly laughing in her seat. "The guy has been following me. Like every day after school he was stalking me, and when I asked him about it, he basically said he wanted to see me get home okay." Steph had to cover her mouth to prevent herself from cackling, and Tim definitely looked redder than before. "So I did a bit of research on the guy, and his past 5 girlfriends and boyfriends said that before they started dating the dude, he would follow them home. And he would tell them I just wanted to make sure you're safe." Sounds pretty familiar. Connor was the first to speak up, and he spoke while still staring at Tim. "You know, that's actually pretty funny, Peter." It was clear he did not think this was funny, though. "Did Red Robin do anything else?" Time to pull out the big guns. Peter smiled as he looked at his friends. "He gave me his phone number." The entire group froze. "He what?" Steph asked, standing up so fast her chair fell. "I don't believe you." At the same time, Duke stiffly chuckled. "That doesn't seem like something he'd do. Are you sure it was Red Robin?" "Yup," Peter responded, smugly pulling the paper out of his pocket. The entire group, except Tim, surged forward to stare at it, and I was thinking we should call him. Then Tim finally spoke. "I don't think that's a good idea. I mean, if he gave you that, it's probably in case you get hurt, and besides, he was probably just trying to be polite." "I don't know," Peter teased. "He told me to call him if I needed anything." Pete used air quotes when speaking, putting extra emphasis on the last word to make it seem more flirtatious. "But you guys know I don't have a phone, Suo. Wanna use one of yours?" Peter suggested, wiggling his eyebrows. He assumed that Red Robin's phone would be different from his normal phone, but most vigilantes carry both, even as civilians. When no one immediately answered, Peter peeked at Duke's phone on the table, and he swiftly grabbed it. "Okay, wait, what are you gonna say if he answers?" Duke asked as Peter began punching in the numbers. I don't know." Peter actually hadn't thought about that. "How about we brainstorm on what to say before calling, 'cause you don't want the guy thinking you're in danger and running in here." Duke was right, so they began discussing what to say. Once they agreed that Peter would tell Red Robin that he didn't have a phone, and an email would be better, Peter began punching in the numbers. At the same time, Connor announced, "Shoot, I think they called our number. Tim, can you get the food?" Tim hurriedly nodded and not so casually walked away. Peter kept his eye on his black-haired friend. Steph put it on speaker, and all of the teenagers were huddled around the phone. Peter noticed how Connor and Steph tried to block any view Peter could have had of Tim. The second it started to ring, Peter heard a distinct buzzing coming from the other side of Batburger. Using his enhanced hearing again, Peter zoned in on the noise. It was coming from Tim's jacket pocket. From the corner of his eye, Peter saw Tim walk into the bathroom. Once the bathroom door closed, Red Robin picked up the phone. "Hello," it was clear he had a voice modulator. Hey Mr. Red Robin, it's me Peter." Peter responded, trying to hide the fact that he was freaking out right now. Sure, he heard Red Hood on the phone, but he could also hear him in the bathroom. He could hear Tim in the bathroom. "Are you hurt? Do you need help, Parker?" He was speaking extremely stiff. The usual kindness in his voice was gone. No, I just wanted to let you know that I don't have a phone. I'm borrowing my friend's right now, so I wouldn't be able to reach you if I need anything. I do have an email, though. Peter was suddenly very nervous. Since he was right about Tim, then what about Duke? What about Steph? Who were they? I don't have an email, Red Robin replied plainly. Don't be sharing this number. And then he hung up. Duke then took his phone back and told Peter, I don't know, man. He didn't sound super interested. Yeah, you're right, but you see where I was coming from, right? Peter joked. And surprisingly, it was Connor that agreed. No, yeah, I get it. Based on what you said, I'd think he had a crush on me too. Steph then looked over her shoulder and back at Connor. Speaking of crushes, what's going on between you and Tim? Connor smiled, pulling one of his piercings between his lips. I don't know what you're talking about, Stephanie. Please, Tim won't tell me anything. You guys are dating though, right? Steph put her hands together and began praying to Connor. If I can't have a love life, let me live vicariously through you. Peter suddenly felt very awkward. He just announced that Connor's probably boyfriend had a crush on him, and Connor agreed. Before he could think about it any longer, Tim was rushing up to the table with the food in his hands. Dang it, did you guys call him already? He's a good liar, Peter thought. Deciding to mess around one more time, Peter suggested, we could always call him again. No, Steph nearly yelled. I mean, I wouldn't want to bother the guy. The rest of lunch wasn't much fun for Peter. Not only did he find out that Tim was Red Robin, but he's pretty sure Duke was Signal. The guy told a Girl Scout cookie joke, and when Steph asked where he got that joke from, he said heard it a few nights ago when he was out. He was talking about Spider-Man. He was referencing Peter's joke. Plus, he was pretty sure Connor was a super something. Naturally, the guy looked like he could bench press a car, but something about him set Peter's spidey sense off. It was similar to how his senses reacted to Dr. Banner's, not in the Hulk way, but in an insane amount of strength way. That night as he went out on patrol, Peter caught a glimpse of Batman, aka Bruce Wayne, and wondered about what other secret identities he could find out. At school, Peter had been tackled with the same question the whole day, what happened to your face? After Laura, his friend from engineering, stopped him in the hallway to ask him, Peter told her, you know, everyone in Gotham seems so numb to bank robberies, but the second I get a bruised jaw, the word is ending. Well, that's different, Laura rolled her eyes at his comment. You have about the same amount of muscle as a 3-day-old puppy. Peter dramatically gasped at her comment, feigning offense. Everyone's worried because we don't want Gotham to scare you away. You know you are very well liked, Peter Parker. And that was different. Back home, people just put up with Peter. Sure, he had a few close friends, but most of the students in his school either didn't know who he was or knew Peter as that annoyingly smart kid. There were a lot of differences between this world and his own, but this was one of the first positive changes. Usually after school, his friends and him would go do something, but when the last bell rang, Tim told Peter, sorry, we can't do anything tonight. We have a family thing. And Peter couldn't help but wonder if it was related to their jobs as vigilantes. He also realized that he should look into Tim's siblings cause there is a fat chance they are a part of Batman's vigilante group. Since he had so much free time, Peter decided to head to the library. As he entered, the red-headed woman looked shocked to see him. Oh, Peter, you're back. It's been a while since I've seen you. She seemed genuinely happy to see him, and when her eyes fell onto his bruised jaw, he could sense her reaching for her phone. Is your face okay? She asked carefully. Yes, Ms. Barabra, I'm fine. I just happened to trip a few days ago and hit myself pretty badly, Peter explained as he approached her. Can I use the computers? No, her answer shocked Peter. Suddenly nervous, Peter slowed his steps. Can I ask why not? He was ready to run away if he needed to. Peter, you need a library card to log into the computer. She pulled out a clipboard and slid it across her desk. The guest account only lets you scroll through the Gotham Wikipedia. Oh, Peter had never thought about that. So you can either sign up for a library card or show me how you bypass the security system. Otherwise, no computer for you. She told him, and when Peter made no effort to grab the clipboard, she began wheeling herself towards the computers. I'm guessing you're going for the second option. Peter gave her a shy smile and followed her. It sort of made sense why she'd want to see how he kept logging in, but something about her made his spidey sense tingle, and not in a good way. Pulling up a chair, Peter scooted over a bit so Barbara could see his screen. She gestured for him to continue, and so he began hacking into the system. Usually Karen would do this in a second or two, but it took him a few minutes. He typed a few sequences into the keyboard, and the screen went blue, showing only the computer's code. Then he maneuvered his ways through the firewalls. It took him around 6 minutes, and then he was logged in. "Who taught you that?" Babs asked him as she stared at his screen. Before Peter could answer, he was interpreted, thankfully so because he didn't have a good excuse. Tim walked into the library and called out, "Babs, hello, why are you at the computers? Oh hey, Peter." Peter returned the warm greeting, but was confused at why Tim was here. "You do realize this is a library," Babs whispered back to Tim. "Yeah, but we need you like now." Tim urgently nodded towards her desk. "Oh, are Steph and Duke here too?" Peter asked, looking behind Tim. But there was no one in the library but them three. Tim and Babs seemed to be having some conversation via expressions, and Peter just sad watching the exchange. "Bruce needs you to answer the phone. We have that big family thing tonight, remember," Tim firmly told her. And now Peter was more confused. Was Babs related to Tim, or was she working with Red Robin and Batman? Then Peter remembered when Babs was sneaking up on him, and his spidey sense told him she was a serious threat. Clearly she had some serious training, and Karen had mentioned that there was a red-headed vigilante called Batgirl for a while. I think I'll just leave then." Peter began to excuse himself despite Babs' protests. Clearly the Batfem knew about something big going on, and he wanted in. Back at the apartment, Peter unveiled his fully charged iron Spidey suit. Since there was a chance Red Hood would come back, Peter unplugged it and put it back in the narrow closet he originally hid it in. Putting the nanotech earpiece in, he asked Karen, "Hey Karen, can you try to find some information for me?" "Of course, Peter, what would you like me to look into?" Peter sat crisscross applesauce in front of his computer, telling the AI, "There is something big happening in Gotham, and recently I've busted a few illegal weapon tradings, so how about we start there? Look into any suspicious shipments that could be tied to any large crime lords." Then the research began. After a few hours and 2 oranges, Karen and Peter had figured out that some man who called himself the Penguin, pretty lame villain name, was planning on showcasing and auctioning off his recently developed weapons to a group of wealthy criminals. According to Peter's research, Penguin is a businessman, so he liked to have his things a bit more organized than other criminals. His showcase was going to take place at the docks tonight at 10:30, and the auction would be in a warehouse near the port. Looking at the time on his watch, Peter saw that it was only 8:15. He had roughly 2 hours until the group of criminals would arrive, but that didn't mean he wouldn't patrol for a little bit. "Okay, Karen, I need to be at the docks by no later than 9. Can you make sure I'm not late?" Peter asked as his suit engulfed his body. "You got it, Peter," she hummed in response, and then Spider-Man dove into the chaos of Gotham's nightlife. Chapter 21, Penguin's Showcase. Summary: Spider-Man makes a guest appearance at Penguin's illegal weapon showcase. Notes: see the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. After dealing with a few drunk teens trying to play GTA in real life, Karen let Peter know that he needed to leave now if he wanted to be at the docks in time. As he swung through Gotham, Peter asked her, "Is there any way you could get me into Batman's comms without setting off any security alerts?" "Yes, Peter, I will do that as soon as they are in range." "Sweet," the teenager replied. He hoped that listening to their conversions would help him figure out who the other Bat family members were. He still didn't know who Robin, Spoiler, Nightwing, Red Hood, or the Orphan were, although he was pretty sure Spoiler was Steph. When Spider-Man was about 5 minutes away from the docks, Karen told him, "They won't be able to hear you. Let me know if you want me to change that." And then he heard Batman's distinct voice, "Everyone in position." A chorus of yes and duh filled Spider-Man's ears. Karen seemed to know exactly what Peter was going to ask, and she identified the location of every bat in the area. They surrounded a few shipping containers, and an X-ray scan showed that the shipping containers led to a deep underground room. "Oracle, are all the buyers here?" Batman asked, and at first Peter assumed that Oracle would be an AI like Karen, but when Bab's distinct voice came through his comms, responding, "Yes, Batman, all the buyers are here, and once they get into the showroom they should be disarmed. Penguin doesn't want any other weapons in his showcase." Peter realized exactly why his spidey sense was so weary of the librarian. As Peter watched the last car drive away from the docks, he figured he'd make a dramatic entrance tonight. Tim was buzzing with excitement for tonight. Finally, he'd be able to close his big case, the one he had been working on for the past 2 weeks. B must have been able to sense his eagerness cause he said, "Red Robin, don't try anything. We are moving in as a team tonight. No solo work." Tim rolled his eyes because yes, he was excited, but he wasn't stupid. There were dozens of criminals here. All of them were top of their game and had their own entourage of security. Trying to fight one person really meant fighting at least 5. When the shipping containment door finally closed, they knew the showcase would be starting soon. Each of the bats made their way to their posts, moving in closer. Once all of them had gotten inside the private room, Oracle let them know that the penguin was scheduled to give a speech in a few minutes. "We will make a move near the end of the speech. On my mark." Batman's gruff voice rang through the family comms. Looking across the room, Tim nodded and saw Orphan do the same. Since Penguin's speeches never were short, Tim got Spoiler's attention, and they silently played rock, paper, scissors from the shadows. "Double R, please tell me that's you moving in early." Nightwing's voice sounded worried. Immediately, Tim abandoned his game and began scanning the room. Suddenly, a blur of purple, no red and blue, swung in front of him, nearly knocking him off his feet. Tim barely had time to process the blur before it landed in the center of the room with a graceful crouch. "Oh, hey there, gentlemen." Spider-Man's voice rang through the underground room. "Sorry to crash your little gun show," but he shot out a web and yanked a particularly nasty-looking rifle from a thug's hands. "This stuff isn't exactly legal, is it?" The room froze for a fraction of a second before chaos erupted. Penguin, who had been mid-speech, turned purple with rage. "Get him, you blithering idiots." The gunmen immediately turned their weapons on the unexpected intruder, but Spider-Man was already moving. Before the first round of gunfire could erupt, he shot 2 webs at the ceiling and yanked himself upward, dodging a wave of bullets. Hanging upside down, he quipped, "Okay, let's all take a deep breath," and he suddenly kicked off the ceiling, flipping forward and landing feet first onto the shoulders of the nearest thug, slamming him into the floor. Maybe reconsider life choices. A second goon swung a rifle at him like a bat, but Spider-Man ducked under it, webbed the man's legs, and yanked hard, sending the guy face first into a table covered in illegal weaponry. The impact sent grenades, ammo, and firearms scattering across the floor. "All right, who's next?" Spider-Man cracked his knuckles. Tim and the rest of his family watched in disbelief as Spider-Man systematically tore through the room's security. He was fast, too fast. Not even Nightwing moved with that level of fluidity, and Tim had never seen someone combine acrobatics and raw power so effortlessly. Batman, watching from above, growled through the comms. "Assess his capabilities, now." But there wasn't much to assess, because within minutes the fight was over. Spider-Man had webbed most of the thugs to the walls, the floor, or the ceiling, and the rest of them were lying on the floor unconscious. Even Penguin himself was wrapped, furious, in a cocoon. "Well, that was fun," Spider-Man said, dusting off his hands. "How did I do, Gotham?" Impressed. Then he surprised the group by turning and waving directly at Batman. Nightwing let out a low whistle. Red Hood folded his arms. Spoiler was silently shaking with laughter. Robin frowned. "TT, that was supposed to be our takedown." Tim just stared, still processing. Batman finally spoke, his voice unreadable. "We'll talk." Spider-Man shot him finger guns. "Can't wait." And then somewhere behind them, Penguin let out a muffled scream of rage. "Will someone get me down from here?" Spoiler finally burst out laughing. Bruce didn't like anything about this. There was a new, highly enhanced hero in his city, and the man was dangerously smart. The only way to know about the showcase involved breaking into the Bat system, without Oracle noticing, or solving the case independently. Tim and Bruce had been working on the case for nearly 2 weeks. Additionally, they had leads from Gordon and private sources. Speaking of Gordon, when he arrived on scene, the man smiled at Spider-Man. The masked hero seemed just as happy to see the commissioner, mentioning how happy he was to see the man again. After hearing Spider-Man's story, he looked towards Bruce and raised a stoic eyebrow, as if to ask if the new hero was being honest. Bruce just gave him a curt nod. Orphan was currently surviving the area, ready to move in case Spider-Man tried to pull another Irish goodbye. Spoiler got sent home after her immature outburst, much to her displeasure, and Nightwing offered to make sure she actually went home, then resume his patrol afterwards. Gordon walked up to Batman and put his pen in his breast pocket. "Anything you'd like to add about today's events?" Bruce just grunted in response. He didn't want to admit that Spider-Man didn't need their help or that he was impressed. Gordon nodded, and a smile threatened to tug at the corners of his lips. "I'll keep you updated, Bat." Throughout their small conversation, Bruce never took his eyes off Spider-Man, analyzing his body language. The second he showed the intention to leave, the Bats would pounce on him. They were getting some answers out of Spider-Man tonight. Peter happily greeted the commissioner. He had been working closely with the man to wipe corruption out of the police force. After their conversation, he wasn't too sure what to do with himself. He could feel people watching him, so he figured he should stick around for a while. But after he got his 7th, "I'll get you, Spider-Man, just you wait," he rolled his eyes and decided to get out of there. The second his feet left the ground, so did the Bat families. He probably wouldn't have noticed if it was just Batman, but when Batman, Robin, and Red Hood all leave in unison, it's hard not to. He swung away lightly, not feeling the need to run away. After all, he wanted to get their attention. Flipping onto a rooftop, he waited for the others. It wasn't that they were far behind, but he assumed they were trying to be sneaky. Hard to be sneaky when I can hear your heartbeats, Peter wanted to announce. Instead, he waited until Batman emerged. Extending his hand, Spider-Man cheerily introduced himself. Hey there, Batman. How you doing? Last time we didn't get a proper introduction. Name's Spider-Man. Keeping his voice monotone, Batman gruffly responded, I know who you are. Nodding awkwardly, Peter noticed that Robin was slowly making his way up to Spider-Man from behind. Peter turned to face the child. Sorry for ruining your thunder, kid. I didn't realize you were so excited about the bust. He shrugged as he spoke, trying to come off as relaxed as possible. Who told you about the showcase? Red Robin broke the silence. No one, Peter spun to look at his friend Tim, and I believe you owe me a coffee. Red Robin's heartbeat spiked at that, and his jaw clenched. Are you saying you figured it all out by yourself? Batman's voice caught Peter's attention. He looked back at the bat and nodded. How long did it take you? Peter thought about it and scratched his head. Probably a few hours. If it was just Batman, he wouldn't have known that this was shocking. But then Red Hood started cackling and walking over to Red Robin, exclaiming, a few hours. And it took you how long? Greatest detective, my ass. You're lying, Robin took out his katana. No, Peter drew out the vowel as he looked around. How long did it take you? Red Robin looked away, unwilling to answer. Clearly it took Tim much longer to solve the case, and Peter saw this as a great opportunity. Well, if you ever need help with another case, feel free to let me know. I'd love to help out. After no one responded, Peter took it as his cue to leave. But as he extended his hand, Batman interrupted him. Why should we trust you? Because I don't think I've done anything to make you think otherwise, Peter responded as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. Because we have a responsibility to take care of people, and it would be selfish to let our personal opinions blind us from a great opportunity. I understand that you might not want to trust me, but you have to recognize that, by working together, we could accomplish tenfold what we do individually. The pair stared at each other for a while until Peter cleared his throat, announcing, Well, I'll leave you guys to it. Good night. He then turned and nodded at the other vigilantes. As he tried to leave, though, his spidey sense alerted him it was almost as if they were telling him that he forgot someone. Looking across the Gotham skyline, towards the shadowy roof of another building, he waved. He was wondering where Orphan was. Notes. Lolsy's sorry for not posting in a while. I got a bit busy. Chapter 22, Get a Drink. Summary. Peter gets confronted by Tim about his injuries and pushes him away. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Since the night of the bust had been a school night, Peter was a bit tired the next day, but he did have a test in AP Physics, so if anyone asked he'd just stay. He studied late last night. Despite how sleepy he was, he made sure to get to school early the next day. He wanted to make sure he got to talk to Tim, Steph, and Duke before school. As the trio headed over to the stairs to enter, Peter ran up next to them, clapping Steph on the back. Geez, you have a late night, Tim just grunted in response. Since Peter had the whole Penguin issue solved by 11 p.m., he figured the group got chewed out by Batman afterwards. Oh right, how was your big family thing? What did you guys do, fight Penguin? Peter made sure to drench his last two words in sarcasm, but the group still had harsh reactions. Tim nearly tripped, Duke catching him, and Steph's sleepy eyes sprung open and she spun to face Peter. Peter loved it. Oh, did you guys not see the news? He asked, feigning confusion. Spider-Man caught Penguin last night. Duke awkwardly chuckled, and Steph let out a breath, telling Peter, oh no, we didn't see the news. Good for him. The rest of the school day went smoothly. Peter cracked a few jokes about Red Robin around Tim, told Duke that he had a great aura, and told Steph that purple was her color. He hoped their bamboozled reactions were due to their exhaustion, otherwise they just sucked at hiding their identities. At lunch, Peter also figured out that they had way more siblings than he expected. Dick was the oldest, then they had a brother that passed away. Peter didn't want to ask for a name. Then there was Tim, Steph, Cassandra, Duke, and then their youngest brother Damien. Although Tim did make an effort to point out that Steph and Duke weren't actually adopted, so they just were house guests that overstayed their welcome. It was an eventful lunch period. Finally, it was sixth period, and Tim and Peter were let out into the courtyard again. They sat on the grass and were working on some homework when Peter reached forward to grab the school-issued camera. His sleeve rode up to reveal a large bruise on his forearm. In the chaos of last night, a thug had fractured his radius by stomping on his arm. It wasn't a clean break and was nearly healed, but he'd need another day for it to be %100 again. He quickly looked at Tim to see if he was paying attention and locked eyes with the boy. Instantly, he shoved his long sleeve down to his knuckles, hiding the mark. Tim put down his notebook and was silent for a minute. "Who was it?" Tim whispered, barely loud enough for Peter to hear. "Huh, what you say? Oh, did you need help with math?" Peter acted clueless, hoping Tim wouldn't ask again. "Peter," his voice was firm. Peter shut his eyes and then looked towards his friend. "It's nothing, man, don't worry. I just got roughed up a bit on my walk to school." It was a good lie, but not good enough for Tim apparently. "Look, I know you might not want to tell me. We only met a few weeks ago, but dude, come on. You've been coming to school with bruises nearly every day, and other days you have a bandage wrapped." Peter didn't let him finish and abruptly stood up. He didn't want to guilt his friend like this, but he had no choice. "So you've known?" His voice was cold and betrayed. "For weeks you've noticed. But what?" He looked down at Tim, who was still sitting on the floor. "You just ignored it." Tim stuttered, looking for the words before he confessed. I didn't want to scare you off." Peter huffed out and then tightly shut his eyes. He felt like such a jerk, but it was too late to go back now. Mustering all his willpower, he gave Tim a cold glare. "Well, you've ignored it for this long, so how about you just keep acting like you don't know anything?" Then he turned and walked away. He didn't look back and proceeded to sneak off campus. The minute he got off school grounds, Peter fisted his hair, hopelessly groaning. Great, what am I supposed to do now?" There was no way he could just act like everything was normal between him and Tim, especially since the guy thought he was being abused. He needed a drink, and of course, since it was Gotham, a bar just happened to be right next to the school. All his usual spots for milkshakes and coffee Tim knew about, so he couldn't go there. Besides, it's not like he could actually get drunk, at least not easily. His accelerated metabolism prevented that. The second he sat down on a bar stool, a drink was in front of him. Peter chuckled to himself. Only in Gotham could a baby-faced teenager walk into a bar in the middle of the day and get served without question. Picking up his drink, his spidey sense clarified that it was safe. Throwing back the whiskey, it burned and he fought the urge to cough. God, how did Tony drink this stuff? He asked himself as the bronzy liquid made its way down his throat. After finishing it, the bartender picked up his glass and raised his eyebrow to ask if he wanted another. Peter thought back to a time when Ned and him first tried alcohol and got caught by Aunt May. Smiling to himself, he figured he'd have won in honor of the memory and nodded back to the bartender. As his drink was being poured, Peter scanned the bar. There were a handful of people inside, and then the door swung open. A man in a gray slipknot shirt sauntered in, the sound from his combat boots making his presence known. He looked around before stopping as he saw Peter. The two stared at each other, and Peter noticed that he had a white streak of hair. It reminded him of a skunk, and if he didn't look so intimidating, Peter would have told him that. Jason never would have expected to see the kid that crashed his safe house in a bar, especially on a Tuesday afternoon. After an awkward staring contest, he decided that he'd use this opportunity to get to know more about him. He may be standoffish towards Red Hood, but he never met Jason before. Taking a seat next to the kid, he lifted a finger, and instantly there was a drink in front of him. As he picked it up, he noticed the glass in the kid's hands. Jason chuckled as he took a sip. "You know you're not old enough to drink that." The kid gave him an unimpressed look as he asked, "You'd be surprised. I'm older than I look." Setting down his drink and leaning onto the bar, Jason looked at the kid and raised an eyebrow. "Really? 'Cause I'd say you're no older than 13. The kid took another small sip before contemplating his answer. To be honest, it was a difficult question for Peter. He hadn't thought too much about his age since he arrived in Gotham. Plus, he had been 16 when he blipped, and he was gone for 5 years. Then he came back to life, and then he ended up in Gotham much younger than he originally was. Going by his birth year, 2001, he was 23, but that was back home. If he used his birth year in Gotham, he'd be 11. "I'm 16, the kid ended up answering, and based on how long it took him to answer that question, he definitely shouldn't be drinking anymore. Shaking his head lightly, Jason asked, "Mind telling me why a 16-year-old kid is in a bar when he probably should be in school?" Jason asked, and without missing a beat, the kid answered, "I'm not a kid." "Doesn't answer my question," Jason answered coolly. The kid didn't answer, but Jason wanted to know more about the runaway crashing in his safe house. "What's your name?" To his surprise, the kid answered with no hesitation, "Peter, and you?" "Jason." The kid finished his drink in one go, flinching at the taste. "So tell me, Peter, what's your sob story?" Peter looked at Jason, slightly confused. "Anyone that goes to a bar during the middle of the day has some kind of problem. So what's yours?" Peter played with his glass for a second, and Jason continued, Does it have something to do with that bruise on your arm? Pulling his shirt down to cover the blue mark, he sighed. It's a long story. As two more glasses got set down in front of the pair, Jason let Peter know, I got nothing but time. Peter looked at the man sitting next to him, Jason. Something about him seemed so familiar, and Peter found himself lowering his guard. Besides, he hadn't been able to talk to anyone about what had happened. His name's Beck, Peter muttered as he brought the glass to his lips. I met him a few months ago, and he was older, way older, but he understood me in ways no one else could. I was so stupid, and I trusted him. When I talked to him, he made me feel like I was the best thing in the world. Jason didn't say anything, no questions, he just listened. Peter appreciated that. One night, he took me out for a drink, and Peter couldn't exactly say that he tricked him into giving him multi-billion-dollar technology, so he left things vague. He tricked me, made me give him something that I never should have. Peter could feel Jason tense at his words and paused, waiting to see if the man would react, but he just stayed quiet, waiting for him to continue. After a while, I figured out that he wasn't someone I should be around. We had a huge fight. Peter grimaced at the memory. It was hard. I had trusted him so much, and he knew that. At one point, I got the upper hand, but he used my trust in him against me. I think he knew that deep down I wanted him to be wrong about him. For a second, I believed what he was saying. Peter looked down into his glass, swirling the liquid. Then he put a gun to my head. Jason's fingers twitched around his glass, and a flash of something crossed his eyes. His previous careless attitude faded away, and he was sitting tightly next to Peter. Peter was the opposite. As he talked, he played with the drink in his hands, taking careless sips. I got away from him after that, but days later he came back to haunt me, told the world about him and I, but he lied, made up stories about what happened, and everyone just hated me. They took his side, and before I knew it, I couldn't go to school without my friends walking me everywhere. Peter darkly chuckled as he thought about it. I don't even know why they all believed him. I mean, they knew me for my entire life, yet all it took was one lie, and then everyone wanted me dead. Then I met some other guys. They helped me get over everything, and it was hard to trust them at first. But I found out they were like me. I moved on from Beck, but he was still haunting me. Before I knew it, I had new people in my life just like him, screwing me over just like he did. Peter's vision fogged up as he thought about everything he lost because of Beck and Goblin. So I ran away. As he finished speaking, he looked over to Jason. He hadn't noticed until now, but the man was staring at him. His green eyes were lit with anger, and the poor lighting in the bar made them look neon. What about you? Peter asked. What's your sob story? Jason didn't respond for a minute. He just stared at Peter, and for a while neither of them moved. Eventually Jason cleared his throat. I just got screwed by the system. Foster system, justice system, all of them. I had a dad at one point, but that didn't last long. Back then I thought he was the coolest thing in the world. But now, Jason huffed out an angry breath. Anyways, I got taken from him, and he didn't even care, barely fought to get me back. When the system spit me out, I came back. He doesn't seem too happy about it, though. Can I ask you a question? Peter requested as he tilted his head. Only if I can ask you one, Jason quipped. Why did you come back? Peter needed to know the answer. Sure, he wanted to go back home, but part of him thought about how safe everyone must be without him. If Jason's family was happy without him, then MJ and Ned could be happy without Peter. What if coming back only made things worse? What if they reacted like Jason's dad? What if they were happier without him? I was pissed my dad wanted to confront him with his mistakes. Plus, as much as I hate that he is here, Gotham is my home. Jason polished off his drink in one swift motion, not even flinching as the liquid burned his throat. Home, Peter thought. All he wanted was to go home, and maybe that wasn't such a selfish idea. My turn, Jason turned to look at Peter. If you ran away, how come you still got bruises? Jason knew it was a difficult question, but he needed to know. He needed to know if there was a new trafficking ring in Gotham, but more than that, he needed to know that his stowaway was safe. I got bad luck, Peter shrugged. Everywhere I go, I attract those guys like a moth to a flame, and I know I should give up, but if they don't come for me, then they'll go for someone else. But I can take it, I don't know if other people can. As heroic as Peter made it sound, it was. He was willingly acting as a punching bag, taking beatings just because he thinks he's strong enough. Jason's eyes were glued to Peter as he remembered how he looked when he walked out of the bathroom. He felt the green, he felt the anger. He wanted to find this Beck guy and kill him for what he did to Peter. He wanted to find all of them and rip them apart. But the second Peter looked back to Jason, the anger fizzled away. The kid was looking at him hopefully. He had a sense of wonder in his eyes that Jason had only ever seen in Dick. Thank you? Jason had no idea why this kid was thanking him, but before he could ask, Peter continued, I didn't realize how nice it was to talk about these things. A soft smile pulled at Peter's lips, and Jason felt a surge of protectiveness, a feeling he only ever had for Dick or Damien. He had a new brother. Notes. Originally, I didn't plan on making Peter's story sound so bad, but then it was low-key funny to write. Anyways, I hope it isn't too bad, zany face. Chapter 23, Misconstrued. Summary. During patrol, Batman attempts to take Spider-Man up on his offer to work together. Chapter text. Since then, school has been a bit awkward for Peter. He is still close with Steph and Duke, but things aren't the same with Tim. And based on how his other friends are acting, Peter is pretty sure Tim hasn't mentioned anything to them. Every time the group wants to hang out, if Tim is going, Peter tries to back out. Tim does the same thing. Friday was the day the friend group usually goes to Batburger, and when the bell rang for snack break, Duke asked Peter to walk with him to his locker after APUSH. As the pair walked, they slipped into easy conversation about their current engineering project. Peter and Duke were trying to make a phone from scratch. Peter could easily do it in a few days with a little dumpster diving, but he liked working with Duke, so he just matched his friend's engineering level. By the way, you're coming to Burger today, Duke said as he opened his locker. There was no room for negotiation as he spoke. He wasn't asking. I don't know, man. I have homework and… Pete shut his mouth as Duke glared at him. Dude, be so for real right now. What did Tim do? You guys were like best friends and then suddenly you can't be in the same room. Peter played with the hem of his shirt and didn't answer for a second. It's not a big deal. He just made me a bit. Peter searched for the right word, uncomfortable. Okay, well, if I tell him not to mention whatever he mentioned again, will you come hang out with us? Duke asked, and there was no way Peter could say no. So he just smiled, fine, but if he brings it up again, I'm leaving. A huge smile bloomed on Duke's face and he shut his locker, sliding his arm around Peter. Good cause I can't deal with Steph alone. You gotta help me, man. That is how Peter ended up in a booth at Batburger with his friends and Tim. He was happy to be hanging out with them again, but it seemed that Tim found a loophole to the no-mentioning rule. The second he saw Peter, his eyes searched him, looking for bruises. He also made sure to order an extra burger for Peter. Then Steph got a message on her phone and raised an eyebrow at Tim before mentioning her worst injury. The friends started to share their stories and all looked towards Peter for an answer. Peter didn't respond, he just glared at Tim. You know you're about as sly as a tap-dancing elephant. His voice was tight, aggressive. He was promised that Tim wouldn't bring it up. Peter stood up and walked towards the door, and he hated how devastated Steph and Duke looked. He wanted to stay and hang out with them, but Tim was making things impossible. As he put his hand on the door to leave, Tim grabbed his shoulder. Wait, Peter, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have brought it up. Peter squeezed the handle before turning to look at Tim. Yeah, you shouldn't have. The second Peter found an alley that Karen confirmed had no cameras, he changed into his Spider-Man suit. He needed to blow off some steam, and swinging always made him more relaxed. In retrospect, it probably wasn't the best idea to start patrol so early. After 6 hours, it was barely 10 p.m., and he was exhausted. He had had some free time in between his crime fighting, and stashed his backpack in his apartment. Plus, he was given a burger after stopping someone from robbing a McDonald's. But crime in Gotham seemed to never stop, and no matter how tired he was, there always seemed to be more people that needed help. After dealing with a group of men who broke into a single mother's apartment, he had been shot in the shoulder, and his exhaustion finally caught up to him. Spider-Man swung onto the roof of a building as he headed back towards Crime Alley. Hunching over to catch his breath, he looked at the Gotham skyline. Suddenly, his view of the city was obstructed as Batman landed in front of him. He instantly straightened himself, not wanting to appear weak, and nodded at Batman Bruce. His spidey sense immediately alerted him that Red Robin was a few feet to his right. The fact that Tim was there made Peter angry. He was still upset about earlier and didn't want to be around the guy. He lifted his hand to swing away when a dulled batarang was thrown at his wrist. Robin, Batman grunted as the kid emerged from behind Batman's shadow. Then looking back to Peter, he growled, "We need to talk." After the incident with Penguin, Bruce couldn't stop thinking about what Spider-Man said. The man was right. It was foolish to not work together. However, the strength that Spider-Man showed that night was enough for Bruce to be worried. He had a lethal amount of precision, and despite his intensive research on the hero, Bruce still didn't have any knowledge of a weakness. He hated the idea of a metahuman in Gotham, but every time he used that as an excuse, Duke pointed out the irony. As he got ready for patrol, he decided he would approach the hero tonight. Bruce was driving the Batmobile when Oracle let him know that Spider-Man was dealing with a braking and entering nearby. Clark, Bruce raised his voice while driving, and then a few minutes later Superman was flying beside the vehicle. Once he arrived near the apartment where Spider-Man was, Bruce parked the car on the side of the road and got out. "Batman, hi Robin, what's wrong?" Clark immediately asked, and waved at Damian, who was still sitting in the car. Batman noticed how his suit was slightly ripped, and he looked more exhausted than usual. Ignoring Superman's question as he floated over towards himself, Bruce asked, "Luthor." Sheepishly the Man of Steel nodded, trying to cover up. "But it's okay now. I just finished dealing with him when you called. So what's up? You never call me to Gotham unless we're in the cave." "Hey there, Superman," Red Robin spoke through Batman's comm, knowing Superman would hear. Batman just looked towards the house that was being broken into, and when Superman opened his mouth to ask another question, Spider-Man flew out of there. "I need to talk with Spider-Man." Bruce would never ask Clark for help, nor say that Spider-Man's strength worried him, but Superman instantly understood. The group Red Robin, Batman, and Superman trailed Spider-Man until he landed on a nearby rooftop. "He's tired," Clark noted as Spider-Man hunched over, breathing heavily. Bruce figured it would be best to try to talk to him when he was least likely to run away, so he shot out his grappling hook, hitting the ground hard in front of Spider-Man. Instantly, Spider-Man cleaned up his appearance. He started breathing softer and stood up straight. He doesn't want to be seen as weak. Bruce expected a quippy joke, but all he got was a curt nod. Surprised, he opened his mouth to speak, but the hero extended his arm, trying to leave. Batman couldn't get a word out before Damian was throwing Batarang at the hero's wrists. "Robin," Bruce scolded him. His son just huffed out in response. Looking back at the hero, Batman told him, "We need to talk." A chill ran down Peter's spine. The Bat never wanted to talk to Spider-Man, and until early this week they never wanted to be on the same roof as each other. The silence wasn't helping Peter's racing mind either. He couldn't help but think about the fact that he was outnumbered, and the fact that Robin just hit his web shooters on purpose worried him. "I thought about what you said," Batman told him, and then Peter took a deep breath, convincing himself he was overthinking, but then he felt it. His spider sense told him there was someone behind him. They had slowed their heartbeat to an unrecognizable pace, their feet were off the ground, and they were strong. From his research, Peter knew there was only one hero Batman would call: Superman. Why did he call Superman? Why are there so many of them? What are they going to do to me? Peter's mind was a mess of anxiety. This had been his longest patrol in a while. Batman must have known this. He must have chosen the day Peter was the most exhausted, and he brought in reinforcements. Peter reached for one of his wrists and tried to appear as casual as possible. "And what do you think?" he asked, as he began clicking his finger against his suit, calling Droney. "I believe that you are strong, dangerously so. You are impulsive too. Many of your plans solely work because of your speed. You also have made an effort to avoid my team." Batman motioned toward Robin and Red Robin. Peter was surprised he could even hear Batman speak, overwhelmed by the sound of his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. "I don't like you in my city." Batman placed his grappling hook back into his holster, and that's when Peter felt Superman get dangerously close. He sensed a hand reaching out and decided he wasn't going to be a sitting duck. Spinning around, Peter launched a fist at Superman's chest. The larger man stumbled back a step, and then right on time, Droney appeared. It released the kryptonite shards, shooting them at Superman, and the hero was instantly on the floor. Batman began charging at him, but Peter simply flipped off Batman's chest, sending the man to the floor. "Droney, attack mode," Peter called out while in the air. Then the small spider device was shooting small beams of energy at everyone on the roof. A characteristic Mr. Stark was very persistent about adding. They didn't do much. Peter had barely begun to work on Droney's aim, but it distracted the heroes, giving Peter enough time to web them and escape. Climbing into the apartment, he began pacing. Peter was angry. First of all, Tim decided to make it impossible for him to have friends, and then Batman, Tim's dad, decides to attack him. Fear and frustration burned through Peter. He just wanted to help people, but every time he tried, he was the one who lost. Peter's fists were balled, and his breathing began to pick up as he recalled the night's events. Batman wanted to hurt him. He even called in Superman for God's sake. And "Peter, please look at the suit. Something seems to be wrong." Karen's voice tore him from his thoughts. Of course something else is wrong, Peter thought as he let the nanotech pour onto the floor. It immediately got to work and displayed a boxy device, and then there was a hologram of Mr. Stark. "All right, Underoos, if you're seeing this, congratulations. You didn't break the suit before I got this thing working. Gold star, maybe two." The tension in Peter's shoulders released, and he stared at the man before him. Welcome to the Stark Mentorship Series, trademark pending. This isn't just about web fluid formulas or suit diagnostics, though you're welcome for those. This is about making sure you're ready. Ready to be the hero I know you are. You'll make mistakes, you'll lose people, but you'll save a hell of a lot more. So sit tight, take notes, and don't talk over me. Yes, I know you do that. Lesson 1, how not to get yourself killed. Then the hologram froze. Peter was staring at Mr. Stark, and any anger he could have possessed slipped away from him. Mr. Stark was smirking, like always, and Peter just stood there staring at his mentor. Have you calmed down, Peter? Karen's voice echoed through the apartment. Oh right, yes, sorry about that. Peter cleared his throat, never taking his eyes off the hologram. You said there was something wrong with the suit. No, the suit is actually fine, Karen replied, but you were clearly upset and you've never seen these before. I figured it was about time you saw. Peter began to smile fondly as the AI spoke. He took a seat on the floor, still looking at the hologram. What is it? The video. Boss wanted to make you an Avenger, but he was worried he wouldn't have enough time to show you the ropes, so he made a series to try and help. It was never finished, but he never stopped working on it, even after Titan. Peter smiled at the thought. Thanks, Karen, Peter whispered. Always, Peter, she replied. Spider-Man's reaction only solidified Batman's belief that he wasn't to be trusted. Not only was he fast enough to knock Superman off guard, but he secretly obtained and weaponized kryptonite. As the vigilante took off into the night, Bruce fought the urge to chase after him. Clark was down, and his sons had been hit. That was enough to keep him on this rooftop, aiding his team. Rushing Clark into the Batcave, Bruce helped the larger man into a cot. Mr. Kent, what a surprise. Alfred appeared holding a silver tray of specialized medical tools that allowed him to operate on Superman's impenetrable skin. Good to see you, Alfred. Superman politely nodded in the direction of the butler as he gripped his side. The kryptonite hadn't hit any major organs, but still it hurt Superman. Blood was dripping down Superman's side when Dick, who was just visiting from Bloodhaven, rushed over. Jesus, he mumbled as he took in the scene. Superman was in pain, bleeding. How the hell was Superman bleeding? Red Robin and Robin's clothes littered with scorch marks, and his father was very clearly angry. What happened? Spider-Man, he didn't bother to elaborate. Instead, Bruce turned around and strode towards the Batcomputer, ripping off his cowl. Oracle, locate Spider-Man. I want to have a tracker on him at all times. On it be, neither of them mentioned how they had tried and failed at tracking Spider-Man in the past. Whoa, I thought he was on our side. Dick looked around the room for answers. TK, that is what the man wants you to think. Father went to give him the opportunity to work with us, and he attacked. Damien began reaching for his swords, ignoring the fact that his cape looked like Swiss cheese. So you walked up to him and he just started swinging? Dick asked, confused. He definitely noticed how Tim stayed silent. Usually he would immediately rattle off his theories on motive and jump at the opportunity to put his stalking abilities to use, but since he'd gotten home from school, he had been acting differently. Tim, Dick asked, softly trying to coax his brother into conversation. But he just shook his head and walked away mumbling. More than confused, Dick was worried. Tim wore an expression he had never seen before, so he took out his phone and shot Connor a text, asking him to come over. Putting his phone back in his pocket, Dick walked next to Bruce. Do you have anything to add? When no response came, he began typing on the computer. After a few clicks, the video footage from Batman's suit popped up. He's tired, Clark's voice rang through the speakers. Pulling up a chair, Dick began to analyze the video. At the same time, Bruce got into the Batmobile. Bruce had been looking everywhere for Spider-Man but found nothing. Oracle had let him know that he must have stopped patrolling, but Bruce didn't stop. He needed to find a clue. B, where are you? Nightwing's voice came through the comms. Upper East Side, Monolith Square. Bruce replied coldly. He wasn't mad at his son, but he couldn't help the irritation that sunk into his voice. Dick didn't respond, and a few minutes later Nightwing flipped onto a roof. Leave Spider-Man alone, Dick told his father, putting his hands on his hips. Excuse me. Just listen to me, B, Dick called out as Batman tried to leave. This guy was clearly injured and tired when you approached him, right? Batman didn't say anything, but he wasn't making any attempt to leave. So this tired and hurt vigilante was suddenly cornered by three of us, and Dick was cut off by his father's gruff voice. We didn't corner him. When he tried to leave, Robin threw a batarang at him, and Bruce hated that he couldn't deny it. So he's injured, tries to leave, you don't let him, you outnumber him, and you have Superman. You see how things could be misconstrued, Dick pleaded, trying to get his father to understand. When Bruce turned to look at him, he continued, this time with more confidence. Also, what the hell was that speech of yours? It sounded pretty threatening. He didn't let me finish, was all Bruce said. Want to fill me in on the rest of it? Nightwing asked, walking over to Batman. Although I don't like him in Gotham, he has earned his right to help us. Clark said Spider-Man's heartbeat was getting too fast. He was trying to calm him down. Yeah, well, it sure didn't look like that. Dick rolled his eyes and bumped shoulders with his father. You know, for a great detective, you can be pretty stupid sometimes. And Bruce would never admit that his son was right, but when his family is involved, sometimes he has a hard time seeing straight. It was probably a subconscious decision to find Spider-Man when he was at his weakest. He had his children with him, and if Spider-Man was to pull anything, he wanted to have the upper hand, hence why he called in Superman. Looking back, it was definitely overkill. Rubbing a gloved hand over his temple, he looked at his son. Dick was everything he wanted to be. He was strong in ways Bruce had no willpower to be, and he was smart. He definitely wasn't a detective like Tim, but he was smart about people. I'll talk to him, try to get him to understand, Dick suggested, and although Bruce hated the idea of his son being alone with a meta, especially one as dangerous as Spider-Man, he knew he had no say. Instead, Bruce gripped Dick's shoulder and nodded. Bruce Wayne's version of a thank you. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe.